That morning, the cold possessed a certain kind of malice. It slipped its icy fingers through the seams of Marcus Thompson's jacket, searching out the tender spaces between his ribs where arthritis made its home, and it settled deep within his bones as if it had found its final resting place. At 63 years old, he remained a stranger to the harsh soul of an Alaskan winter, even after 2 decades had weathered his face. Some things, he knew, a man never grows accustomed to: a cold that steals your breath, a loneliness so profound it becomes a physical presence, the way a profound silence can fill a home until it weighs more than all the memories held within its walls. He stood upon the threshold of Frozen Heart Lake, a name whispered by locals, though you'd find it on no cartographer's chart, and watched his own breath bloom into fleeting ghosts before his eyes. The ice unfurled before him, a tapestry of white, pristine, and profoundly dishonest. For ice was always a beautiful liar. It promised solidity. It offered the illusion of safety. But just beneath its fragile skin, the water churned, black and fathomless and patient. And it was there, in that vast and desolate theater, that he saw it. At first, Marcus surrendered to the simplest explanation: a bear. It had to be. A dark, struggling form upon the ice, perhaps 200 feet from the shore. But the thrashing was all wrong, a frantic ballet of despair that no bear would perform. And the sound. The sound was a wet, desperate keening that drifted across the frozen expanse, a lament that found his soul and twisted it. He raised his binoculars, his hands trembling slightly. The nascent sun had just begun to kiss the mountain peaks, casting long, dramatic shadows across the ice that played tricks on the eye. He found his focus, sharpened the image, and then his world, his breath, his very heartbeat, came to a sudden, chilling halt. It was not a bear. Dear God in heaven, it was not a bear. The being on the ice was a titan, standing at least 8 feet tall, maybe even more. It was cloaked in dark, matted fur, but the silhouette beneath was a perversion of nature's laws. It was too human. Its arms were too long, its legs bent at angles that defied every animal Marcus had ever known, and he had spent 40 years as a warden of the wilderness before his own body betrayed him into retirement. The creature had shattered the ice and now clung to its treacherous edge with hands not paws, but hands desperately trying to heave itself from the abyss. But the ice was a cruel accomplice to the water, breaking with every effort, sending the creature slipping back into the black, liquid cold. It was fading. Marcus could see the life-light dimming in its struggle. The movements grew more languid, the will to survive slowly surrendering to the inevitable. Hell, he breathed into the frozen air. Then, with a voice full of a weary sorrow, God damn it all. He knew the path of reason. He should retreat to the warmth of his truck, make the 40-minute journey to town, and lay this impossible burden at the feet of Sheriff Williams. Let a younger man deal with this. Let someone whose joints didn't sing, a chorus of gravel and grinding with every step, take the lead. But 40 minutes there, and another 40 minutes back. By then, whatever that impossible thing was, it would be a frozen relic, its story drowned in the silent depths. Marcus felt a memory surface, the last words his wife Sarah had ever whispered to him before the cancer stole her from this world. You always did have more heart than sense, Marcus Thompson. A ghost of a smile had graced her lips, faint but true. Her hand, a fragile, cool bird in his own, a stark contrast to the sterile warmth of the hospital room. 3 years she had been gone. 3 years of a house that echoed with emptiness, its silence, a testament to the colossal space her absence had left behind. More heart than sense, he whispered back to her memory, a promise made to the wind, and then, with a newfound resolve, he began to gather his rope. Now, I can feel what you're thinking. That this is the moment in the story where I tell you Marcus was a fool, that the tragedy to come was written in the stars, that he should have turned his back, and perhaps you are right. But you must understand something about men like Marcus, men who have lived long enough to lay their love to rest, to feel their own bodies crumble piece by painful piece, to awaken each dawn in a house haunted by beautiful ghosts sometimes. You just need something to matter again, even if it's born of foolishness, especially if it's born of foolishness. Before we follow Marcus onto that treacherous ice, do me a small kindness, find that subscribe button and give it a press. This channel is a sanctuary for true stories that dare to ask what lies beyond the veil of our understanding. And believe me, once you hear the rest of Marcus's tale, you will want to remain in this sanctuary for what comes next. Very well. Let us return to the crystalline shores of Frozen Heart Lake. Marcus assembled his arsenal. Weathered rope, steel carabiners, an old harness from his climbing days that now hugged his frame like a memory of a younger man, and a broad sheet of plywood from the bed of his truck. The plywood was a prayer against the ice's fragility, a way to distribute his weight. It was a principle of glacier travel. though this was no glacier, and it had been 10 long years since he'd last danced with such dangers. His knees screamed in protest as he knelt to secure the harness, the arthritis, a symphony of broken glass within his joints. He had pills for the agony. Doctor, Martinez was always pushing the stronger prescriptions, the ones that veiled the world in a fog and turned your thoughts to slow-moving molasses, but Marcus refused them on most days. He chose the pain. Pain was a brutal, beautiful reminder that you were still breathing. The fog was a different kind of death, the kind where you were just too numb to lie down. He anchored one end of the rope to the trailer hitch of his truck, testing its resolve against his own. It held firm. Then, taking up the plywood, he began his pilgrimage across the ice. The cold seeped up through the soles of his boots, a relentless chill. The ice beneath him began to sing, a deep, resonant groan like the sound of the earth stirring in its sleep. Marcus kept the plywood beneath his feet, a floating island of hope, moving with a deliberate, prayerful slowness. The creature had ceased its thrashing. Had the end already come? From this distance, it was impossible to know. 50 feet out, then 100. The morning light grew bolder now, painting the landscape in hues of rose and gold, lending the ice a deceptive, heartbreaking beauty. It looked like a postcard from a place where nothing ever went wrong, a place of safety. And then, the groaning deepened into a song of warning. Marcus froze. He looked down. Beneath the surface, he could see a network of cracks spreading from his feet, like lightning captured in glass, hairline fractures blossoming into something sinister. "Easy now," he whispered. A plea to himself, to the ice, and to whatever God might be listening on such a cold morning. He pressed on, each step an act of faith. At 150 feet, the creature stirred and lifted its massive head. It looked directly at him, and in that one profound moment, Marcus finally understood why humanity had always given these beings names like monster, demon, devil. It was not because of what they were, but because of what they were not. They were just close enough to the human form to spark the light of recognition, and just far enough away to ignite the darkness of revulsion. Its face was broad and flat, ape-like, yet profoundly different, but the eyes were devastatingly human. Deep set beneath a heavy, sorrowful brow, they were dark pools of intelligence, and they were filled with something Marcus recognized intimately, for he saw it in his own reflection every single morning. The soul-crushing knowledge that time was running out. The creature uttered a sound, a low, rumbling vibration that was not a roar, but a desperate, heartbreaking plea. "I see you," Marcus whispered, his voice a fragile thread against the immense, silent tapestry of white. "Just hold on." A scent, carried on the frozen air, reached him, then the primal perfume of damp fur and a clean, wild musk, a world away from the sour decay of a starving bear. Its coat, a deep umber that bled to near midnight where the water clung, was plastered to a frame of impossible breadth, shoulders that dwarfed the memory of any man he had ever known, and arms that descended to an unnatural length, ending in hands so unsettlingly human they stirred a deep and ancient disquiet within him. Those very hands, a paradox of the familiar and the strange, were clinging to the jagged lip of the ice. Not claws, he saw, but nails thick and yellowed carving desperate furrows into the unyielding frozen pain. He ventured as near as his courage would allow, a mere 15 feet separating his world from the abyss. Beneath the great being, the ice had fractured into a crystalline spiderweb, the dark, hungry water winking through its fissures. One false step, and the lake would claim them both. With hands that trembled from a trinity of assailants, the biting cold, the primal fear, and the unyielding march of age, he uncoiled the rope from his waist, fashioning a life-saving loop. "I'm going to cast this line to you," he murmured. The words, a quiet offering to the wind. Whether it understood the language mattered little. The heart's intention, the sincerity in a voice that was a universal tongue. "You take hold. Cling to it. I will draw you from this cold embrace." The creature held his gaze, its eyes a mirror of some deep, familiar sorrow, a humanity so profound it was almost unbearable to witness. With a prayer whispered on his breath, Marcus cast the rope across the chasm of ice and despair. A sharp crack echoed from his shoulder, a painful ghost of a fall in '78 that never truly healed, yet his aim was true. The loop settled perfectly over the creature's massive shoulder. It looked at the rope, then back at Marcus with a long, searching gaze, and with a grace that defied its colossal form, it accepted the offering, its hands closing around the lifeline. A relieved sigh escaped his lips, a plume of white in the frozen air. "Good," he breathed, the word a fragile testament to hope. "That's so very good." He began his retreat, pulling the rope, singing with tension. The being struggled, its powerful legs, each surely weighing 200 pounds, churning in the water. The ice screamed in protest, A louder, more violent sound, before a great slab, the size of a family dining table, surrendered and plunged sideways, taking the creature with it into the depths. The sudden, brutal weight struck the line like a sledgehammer, yanking Marcus from his feet. He fell hard, his cheek stinging against the frozen surface, a searing fire tracing the rope's path through his worn gloves as his makeshift sled skittered away. But through the fire in his hands and the ice on his skin, he did not let go. A lifetime of this work called to him from the past, from his years with the Forest Service, before budgets were slashed, before his knees betrayed him, before Sarah's illness cast a shadow over all things. The body remembers what the heart can't forget. He anchored the rope around his forearm, found his footing on the treacherous ice, and pulled with a strength born of memory and love. It broke the surface once more, a great, shuddering gasp tearing from its lungs, its grip on the rope, an unbreakable promise. Marcus heaved again and felt a sharp, sickening pop in the small of his back, a debt of pain to be paid later, one that would likely demand a surgeon's knife he could never afford. But the creature was gaining purchase, dragging itself onto a more stable shelf of ice. He continued his rhythmic retreat, hand over hand, drawing the impossible from the water. The groaning ice, stretched to its very limits, bore their combined weight. It protested, it threatened, but it held. Just 20 feet from the safety of the shore, the being found its legs. It rose onto all fours in a posture that warred with its human-like form, a disquieting blend of man and beast. It crawled toward land, a living tributary of water streaming from its dark fur as its profound body heat sent plumes of steam into the biting air. Marcus finally stepped backward onto solid ground, the unyielding earth of Frozen Heart Lake's bank beneath his boots. Never in his life had he felt such profound gratitude for the simple, solid gift of dirt. The creature, too, reached the shore and surrendered to gravity, collapsing in a heap. It lay there, its entire massive frame trembling with each enormous, ragged breath it drew from the world. Marcus collapsed as well, his back a column of fire, his hands stripped raw, his heart hammering a wild rhythm against his ribs, a dangerous percussion for a man of 63 years. But he had done it. He had pulled a living myth from a frozen lake. A laugh erupted from deep within him, raw and uncontrollable, the kind of delirious joy that blooms on the far side of foolishness, in the place where madness and miracles meet. Slowly, the creature lifted its heavy head, and its eyes found his once more, holding him in a gaze of ancient understanding. And in that silent communion, Marcus knew with absolute certainty, it understands. The depth of this act is not lost on it. Then, its eyelids, heavy as stones, drifted shut. Life remained, a faint and flickering ember in the vastness of its chest. Marcus's gaze drifted from his old truck, a vessel of escape, to the mythical being at his feet, and then to the lonely road that wound its way back toward the world of men. More heart than sense, he whispered to the wind, the words a perfect echo of Sarah's voice, a melody of love, exasperation, and a presence he missed more than breath itself. And in that moment, he made a choice from which there could be no return, a single act that would forever cleave his life into the man he was before and the man he was about to become. He was going to bring this impossible, wounded soul home. The 10-mile journey to his cabin was a long, winding road through the landscape of his own sanity. In the truck bed, beneath a tarp and the meager warmth of every blanket he owned, lay the reason for his doubt, a life that flickered, faint but persistent. By what strange and sudden madness had he been seized? The question echoed with every turn of the tires. What possesses a man to bring a legend, a living, breathing myth to his own hearth? The world would demand its share, the Forest Service, the Rangers, the insatiable hunger of the news. He could almost hear the clamor, see the headlines, feel the weight of the money National Geographic would offer for a glimpse of the impossible. Yet onward he pressed, the engine a steady heartbeat against the wild silence. The cabin was a promise at the end of a dirt path that wept mud in the spring and turned to a heart of ice in the winter's grip, a simple A-frame, a sanctuary of 2 modest bedrooms and 1 bath. Its soul, a wood stove with an insatiable appetite for cordwood, devouring it like a child does candy. It was a place born from his own hands in the bygone 90s, a time when his spine was a pillar of strength, when Sarah's laughter filled the air, and Alaska was a canvas of freedom, not a portrait of exile. He came to a stop before the shed, a solitary structure standing sentinel out back, once a proud repository for the tools of his trade, before his knees betrayed him, and his days as a guide became a distant, cherished memory. Now, it was a tomb for forgotten things, faded camping gear, silent tools, the quiet scatterings of mice. Yet, its bones were strong, its walls held warmth, and a kerosene heater waited, like a dormant heart. Marcus left the truck's engine humming, its precious warmth a lifeline bleeding into the truck bed, a fragile shield against the encroaching frost for the being he carried as he moved toward the cabin. Each step was a fresh agony, his back a chorus of screams. That sharp crack he'd felt earlier was a promise of deep pain. He knew what was needed. The cold kiss of ice and the fire of whiskey, the kind meant for mending, not for mirth. But before any of that, a sanctuary had to be prepared. Within 20 minutes, the kerosene heater breathed a hesitant warmth into the air. A space had been cleared upon the floor, and a humble bed of sleeping bags and a foam pad, a relic of better decades, was laid out in offering. The chill in the shed did not flee, but it retreated, from a biting freeze to a bearable cold. It was a small victory, but a victory nonetheless. To bring the being from the truck to the shelter, however, was a challenge of a different magnitude entirely. A flicker of consciousness had returned, just barely. Its eyes, mere slivers of awareness, watched as Marcus gently lowered the tailgate, and a sound escaped its throat, a low, questioning rumble that vibrated from the very depths of its chest. "Easy," Marcus whispered, his voice a well-worn blanket, woven with the same gentleness he had once offered to startled horses, to wounded hikers, and to his Sarah when the waves of her pain crested. "I am only here to help." The creature held his gaze, a long, silent study. Then, with a grace born of agony, it began to stir, drawing its immense form toward the edge, with arms of impossible length. Marcus braced himself, fitting his shoulder beneath one colossal arm, the hollow of its armpit dwarfing his own head, and with a shared, unspoken will, they brought the being to its feet. It was a fragile stance, a living mountain leaning upon a man of brittle bone, and Marcus felt his own spine yield and compress beneath the impossible burden. It was a weight of at least 400 pounds, perhaps even 500. The scent rising from its damp fur was a wild perfume of lake water and primal musk, yet threaded with an unexpected sweetness the ghost of cedar, or the memory of sage. Their journey to the shed was a pilgrimage, a mere 20 feet that stretched into 10 agonizing minutes. The creature faltered often, its breath ragged and its legs trembling, yet with a spirit that refused to break, it kept moving forward. Once across the threshold, its strength gave out completely, and it collapsed onto the waiting bed of sleeping bags, curling onto its side as its eyelids, heavy as stones, drifted shut. Marcus remained standing, a statue of pain, his own breath catching in his throat as his back seized in protest. He gazed upon the consequence of his compassion. Even in repose, it was a titan, a being that would surely stand 8 feet tall, if not more, draped in dark, matted fur that was now slowly yielding its moisture to the air, revealing patches of a lighter, warmer brown beneath. And its face, dear God, its face was a breathtaking paradox, achingly, impossibly human, with high cheekbones sculpted beneath a heavy, thoughtful brow. A nose, broad and flat, yet undeniably a nose, and lips that held a strange delicacy. And its hands, they were a revelation, with 5 fingers and a thumb that could grasp, ending not in claws, but in nails. An undeniable intelligence shone from it. Marcus felt this truth in his bones, saw it in the way the creature had watched him, weighed him, and made its own silent choices. This was no mere animal, nor was it a man. It was something other, something that walked the sacred space between a secret whispered by evolution and kept safe within the deep woods and silent mountains, far from the clamor of cities and the judgment of men with guns. He breathed the question into the quiet air of the shed, a prayer to no one. What in God's name have I done? As if in answer, the creature opened a single eye, its gaze finding his for a fleeting, profound moment before the lid drifted shut once more. The journey back to the cabin was a trial. The fire in his back had grown to a blaze, and he knew he had to find a chair before his legs gave way. He eased his protesting body into the familiar embrace of his recliner, the one Sarah had always called ugly as sin, yet admitted was comfortable as a cloud, and willed his racing mind to find stillness. The truth of it settled upon him, vast and unbelievable. He had a Bigfoot resting in his shed, a living, breathing myth, a genuine, honest-to-God Bigfoot. His phone lay on the coffee table, a small black stone holding the entire world. A call to Sheriff Williams, or perhaps Dr. Martinez, was only a touch away. He could tell them everything, share the miracle he had found, the life he had saved. But what would follow that call? They would come for it, of course. It would be studied, caged, locked away in some cold, sterile facility. The being would cease to be a life and become property. Government property, most likely, or corporate property. Some pharmaceutical giant would yearn to dissect its secrets, to discover what made it unique and how they could distill its very essence into a patent. And in that moment, its freedom, the wild, untamed liberty it had known since the dawn of its kind, would be extinguished forever. His mind returned to the creature's eyes, to the profound intelligence and deep awareness he saw there. He remembered the moment it understood the thrown rope, the conscious choice it made to take hold, the leap of faith it took in trusting a stranger to lead it from the water's cold embrace. He whispered the words to himself, a judgment on them both. More heart than sense. As if to seal his decision, the first true snow of the season began to fall, descending in thick, deliberate flakes that promised to blanket the world in silence. By morning's light, the road would be a ghost, impassable. No one would be coming. And that isolation, once a burden, was now a gift. It meant he had time. Time to sit with the enormity of his choice and discover what path he was meant to walk. And time to pray that the life he had sheltered would have the strength to see the dawn. Marcus rose to his feet, his back a map of pain, protesting every inch of movement, and made his way to the kitchen. He had medicines, simple things from his guiding years, the stuff of bandages, antiseptics, and balms for pain. He even had a veterinary kit, a remnant from the days Sarah kept her chickens, holding antibiotics formulated for livestock, but which, he hoped, would offer a fighting chance to the miraculous being resting in his shed. He summoned the elements of care, a basin brimming with steam, a soft collection of towels, and clean linens that could be rendered into bandages at a moment's notice. And for his own trembling soul, a bottle of whiskey, for this was a moment suspended outside of ordinary time, a moment that demanded such a sacrament. With these humble offerings gathered, he stepped once more into the cold, back toward the quiet sanctuary of the shed. The being lay just as he had left it, a silent monument to stillness, its great form curled into a question mark against the floor. Its breath, a slow and profound rhythm, was the only sign of the life held within, a state somewhere between the oblivion of sleep and the abyss of unconsciousness. Marcus placed his burdens down, a quiet priest at an unknown altar, and coaxed a little more life from the kerosene heater. The air began to shed its bitterest chill, transforming the space from a tomb of cold into a cradle of survival. He lowered himself to his knees, the sound of his joints, a sharp, percussive retort in the hallowed quiet, and began his solemn examination of this impossible being. To be this near was to witness a tapestry of astonishing detail. The fur was a landscape unto itself, shorter and finer upon the face and hands, then lengthening into a deep, wild mantle over its body. Its color was the earth's own story, a deep, rich brown at the roots that faded to a sun-kissed umber at the tips. It was a coat woven for the cruelest Alaskan winters. And where the fur gave way, on the palms and face, the skin was the color of a moonless night sky, a deep and ancient gray that verged on black. His hands found no open wounds, no seeping lifeblood, only a cold that was a presence in itself, a deep and chilling stillness that had seeped into the very core of the creature. Hypothermia was the likely thief, with shock as its accomplice. It had languished in the lake's icy embrace for an eternity, long enough for the light of its life to flicker and nearly fade. He dipped a cloth into the basin of warmth, a small offering against the profound cold. Gently, he began to cleanse the matted fur, a tender effort to banish the memory of the lake and coax warmth back into the skin beneath. In response, the great form stirred, and a sound, soft as a murmur, escaped its lips, a note of pure, gentle inquiry. "I'm just tending to you," Marcus whispered, his voice a thread of sound in the quiet space. "You are safe here. I give you my word." And then the creature opened its eyes, two dark pools reflecting the lantern light. They fixed upon Marcus, not with fear, but with a weariness that seemed as old as the mountains themselves. And in their depths, he thought he saw a flicker of something more, a silent acknowledgement, a dawning of gratitude. Marcus continued his quiet ministry, meticulously drying the deep fur, willing warmth back into the massive frame. His searching fingers found the smaller hurts, the hands abraded by the cruel edge of the ice, a shallow wound upon one knee that called for cleansing. These were but superficial wounds. The true enemy, the silent predator, was the relentless cold. He swaddled the creature in every dry blanket he possessed, the ones from his own bed, those folded away in the closet, the forgotten ones from deep within the cabin's storage. He layered them one upon another until the being was encased in a warm, protective cocoon, a fortress against the encroaching frost. "There," Marcus breathed, the words misting in the air. "It is the best that I can offer." From within the nest of blankets came another sound, this one softer, a sigh of surrender. And then its eyes drifted closed, and it fell into the deep, healing arms of sleep. Marcus finally allowed himself to rest, his body slumping against the rough-hewn wall of the shed. A chorus of pain sang through him, his back a screaming nerve, his hands a raw testament to the rope's friction, his knees a grinding agony of gravel and bone. The logic of his body cried out for the cabin, for the solace of his medicine, for the cold relief of ice and the memory of his own bed. And yet he remained. He sat there in the growing warmth of the shed, a sentinel listening to the steady, miraculous rhythm of the creature's breath, his gaze lost in the silent dance of snowflakes whispering through the gap beneath the door, and a question echoed in the chamber of his soul. What on this earth was to become of them now? Beyond the walls, the world was surrendering to a blanket of white. But inside, Marcus Thompson kept vigil with a being born of legend, and he felt, for the first time in 3 long years, the stirrings of purpose, a sense that his own story had not yet reached its end, even if that purpose was woven from the threads of utter madness. The creature endured the long night, a truth Marcus confirmed, with each pilgrimage he made every 2 hours. He journeyed through the deepening snow, a lone traveler between the cabin and the shed, his flashlight a blade of light slicing through the profound dark. With every visit, the creature's breath seemed to find a deeper, stronger cadence. By 4 in the morning, it had stirred and found a new position. By the first blush of dawn at 6, its eyes were open. When Marcus entered bearing what he humbly called breakfast, he found the being sitting upright. The meal was a simple one: strips of dried venison, the sweet sun of summer captured in a can of peaches, and a thermos of steaming coffee. It was far from a king's feast, but it was the bounty of his larder. The creature observed his approach, its gaze now sharp and alert, tracking his every step with eyes that held an unsettling echo of humanity. Marcus placed the offerings on the floor and retreated, granting it the dignity of space. "I thought you might be hungry," he murmured, the words feeling foolish and small. Of course it was hungry. It isn't much, I'm afraid, but... A great hand reached for the can of peaches, its movement a study in deliberate, graceful control. It lifted the small tin a thimble in its colossal grasp and brought it close, inhaling its sweet scent. Then, tilting its head back, it drank the syrup in a single, fluid motion, the golden juice tracing rivulets through its dark fur. When the can was empty, it was set down with a quiet finality, and those ancient eyes found Marcus once more. Marcus offered a single word, a hopeful question. "More?" The being responded with a low, resonant sound, a vibration that held no words, yet was an unmistakable and profound affirmation. Marcus turned and walked back toward the cabin, a dawning wonder illuminating his mind. This was not a dream. This was the solid, unbelievable truth. A creature of myth was residing in his shed, finding sustenance in canned peaches. A laugh escaped him, unbidden and wild, teetering on that thin, sharp edge between a profound breakthrough and a complete unraveling. He returned to his pantry and plundered it with a newfound purpose, gathering canned beans, corn, and tuna. He found apples, their skins just beginning to wrinkle with age, and a prized package of frozen salmon, a frozen memory of the previous summer's catch. He even warmed the fish in his microwave, for it seemed his life now included the role of chef to a cryptid, and he could only ask, why not? And carried this new feast back to the shed. The creature consumed every last morsel, its process methodical and focused. Its hands, for all their immense size, moved with the surprising dexterity of fine instruments. It devoured the salmon, frozen or not, in its raw state, tearing away flesh with teeth that Marcus consciously avoided studying too closely, teeth that spoke of a primal, carnivorous nature. A great many teeth. When the last of the food was gone, the creature's gaze fell upon him once more. And then it did something so unexpected, so profound, that the very air seemed to catch in Marcus's throat. It raised a colossal hand, pointed a single finger toward its own heart, and tapped its chest with a quiet resonance. And from its throat came a sound, a deep and guttural breath of a word, hua. It felt like a whisper from another world, a sound struggling to form a word. A name? A profound curiosity pulled Marcus closer, his body leaning into the mystery. Who? The sound echoed again, this time with a deliberate, resonant force that seemed to fill the small space between them. Hugh? Marcus ventured, his voice gentle, shaping the sound into the closest human equivalent his tongue could manage. A subtle change rippled across the creature's features, a complex emotion veiled by the thick tapestry of its fur. Yet Marcus sensed a flicker of contentment. Then, a deliberate inclination of its head confirmed it. An undeniable nod. Hugh, Marcus repeated, the name now feeling solid, real. Is that what you are called? Is your name Hugh? Another slow, confirming nod answered him, a silent affirmation that bridged the chasm between their two worlds. My God, Marcus breathed, the weight of the revelation sinking him onto a weathered storage crate. You can understand me. And so he was Hugh, for that was the name now tethered to this magnificent being who simply canted his head, his gaze a deep well of silent observation, of patient waiting. I am Marcus, he offered, a hand to his own chest in a gesture of introduction. Marcus Thompson. Hugh attempted to echo the sound, his own voice shaping it into a deep, guttural maharkas. It was more than close enough. It was a connection, forged in sound. In the quiet that followed, they simply regarded one another, a man and a being from the wild. Yet the word monster felt like a betrayal. For what monster bears a name? What monster acknowledges truth with a nod, or gazes upon you with eyes that hold the spark of intellect, the depth of a soul, and a curiosity as profound as your own? In heaven's name, what are you? Marcus whispered into the stillness, the question a vessel for his awe, not a plea for an answer. Hugh's silent gaze held the answer, a truth that bloomed in Marcus's heart. Whatever this creature was, he was solitary, a soul wandering the vast, untamed wilderness, perhaps for countless seasons, maybe for an entire lifetime, a loneliness that mirrored Marcus's own, yet amplified into something far more profound. For there was only one of Hugh, and if others of his kind breathed, they were ghosts in the forest, so scattered and unseen as to be mere legend. The sheer weight of that solitude struck Marcus with the force of a physical blow. The ache of being the last of your kind, or so close to it. To journey through this life with the certain knowledge that no other soul could ever truly comprehend the landscape of your heart. Yes, Marcus murmured, his voice a thread of empathy. I understand. Through the passage of the next 3 days, as the world outside was hushed and buried beneath a deepening snow, sealing them in, a quiet rhythm formed between them. Marcus would appear with sustenance 3 times with the turning of the Sunday Hugh would accept. They would share the space of the warming shed, their silence a language richer than words, spoken in the turn of a hand, the nuance of a sound, the shift of an expression. The mending of Hugh's body was a miracle to behold, a healing so swift it defied belief. The abrasions on his hands vanished by the second dawn. The deep cut on his knee had faded to a whisper of a scar by the third. His vital force was returning, a tide rising within him. Marcus would observe as he stretched, rose to his full height, and paced the small enclosure, 8 feet of raw power and dense fur, moving with an astonishing, fluid grace. On the morning of the 4th day, Marcus awoke to a profound emptiness in the shed, and the sight of Hugh standing free beneath the open sky. For a fleeting moment, his heart seized in his chest. He hastened to the window, a swiftness his weary back could barely manage, and peered out. There stood Hugh, a solitary figure against the snow at the edge of the forest, his head tilted toward the heavens. He was simply there, unbound, with the freedom to vanish back into the wild heart of the world that had birthed him. Marcus held his ground, his breath a ghost in his lungs. This was the moment of truth. Hugh would surely feel the call of his own world and return to the life he knew before the treachery of the ice, before Marcus had intervened in his fate. Yet Hugh did not depart. He remained for perhaps 5 minutes, a statue of contemplation, before turning and making his way back to the shelter. His eyes found Marcus at the window, and a fleeting expression, something akin to a human smile, graced his beautifully strange features. It was a choice, clear and profound. He was choosing to remain. That evening, nursing a beer in the quiet solitude of his cabin, Marcus wrestled with the meaning of that choice. Hugh was a free being. The shed held no lock, and even if it had, its walls were no match for his strength. And still, he stayed. The question hung in the air. Why? Perhaps it was the very same current that had compelled Marcus to pull him from the frozen river, a deep, aching loneliness. That elemental need, not just of man but of all sentient life, for connection, the simple, desperate desire to be seen, to have one's existence acknowledged, to matter enough that one's life or death would leave a ripple in the world. Always more heart than sense, Marcus whispered to the photograph of Sarah on the mantelpiece. Her smile met his, a moment captured when she was 57, eternally vibrant as the years weathered him. The ache of her loss was a constant companion, present in every day, in every passing hour. The house was a vessel filled with the shape of her absence, the hollow on the sofa, the ceramic mug that held her coffee, the familiar curve of her script on lists still clinging to the refrigerator. He had preserved it all, a sanctuary dedicated to a life that had ended. But perhaps this was a new chapter. Hugh was a new reason. A purpose to rise with the Sunday, a reason to prepare a meal, to check the humble shed, to simply be present for one more day. Marcus drained the last of his beer and retired for the night, surrendering to a sleep more peaceful and profound than any he had known in months. With the clarity of a new dawn, Marcus arrived at a decision. If Hugh's presence was to be a lasting one, an understanding must be reached, and a simple shed was no longer a fitting home. The cabin held 2 chambers for sleeping. One was his own. The other had been a chrysalis of Sarah's life. First, her sewing room, then the room of her illness, and finally, a silent archive of boxes he lacked the strength to disturb. 3 years of settled dust, of poignant memories, and of artifacts too painful for his eyes to behold. For what felt like an eternity, he lingered on the threshold, a silent guardian at the gate of memory, before his hands found their purpose and began the solemn work of moving what remained. The sun charted its slow course across the winter sky as he labored, his body protesting the strain with 2 sharp betrayals from his spine, forcing a pause for the ritual of pills and ice before he could press on. As twilight painted the windows in hues of lavender and gray, the room was finally reborn, purged of the ghosts of what had been Sarah's sewing machine, now a silent memory in the attic, the cold apparatus of illness that had transformed their sanctuary into a place of waiting now sealed away in shadow. All that endured was a room holding a bed, a queen-sized vessel, likely a world too small for a giant like Hugh, yet of far kinder grace than the cold floor and bare walls that held the silent promise of new stories, its windows gazing out into the deep, whispering heart of the forest. With a sense of profound absurdity, Marcus dressed the bed in fresh linens, the simple act feeling like a prayer offered to an unknown god. For Hugh was not a beast of the wild, nor was he entirely a man, but he existed in that sacred space between a being whose dignity demanded more than the cold earth for a resting place. He sought out the shed as the day bled into the deep blue of dusk, finding Hugh not slumbering but awake and seated, his immense hands tenderly coaxing a new form from forgotten things. As Marcus drew nearer, the mystery resolved into a marvel. From the rust and ruin of old fencing wire, Hugh was spinning a delicate creation, bending the unforgiving metal into the impossible shape of a bird, its wings forever outstretched in silent flight. You breathed life into that? Marcus whispered, his voice filled with a quiet awe. Hugh lifted his gaze, and in a gesture of profound offering, held out his creation. The artistry was a miracle, a testament to a gentle soul. Individual feathers were merely suggested by the wire's elegant curves. A beak was born from a simple twist, and its eyes were but 2 tiny, perfect loops. All of this, conjured from those powerful, massive hands, that is a thing of true beauty, Hugh. A low, pleased rumble emanated from Hugh's chest as he set the wire bird down with the reverence of a holy relic, then turned to Marcus with that same soul-deep question in his eyes. "I've prepared a room for you," Marcus said, the words feeling small in the vastness of the moment. "Inside the cabin. It will be warmer than this place. There's a bed, well, a bed that might not quite fit you, but it's a start." Hugh rose to his full, towering height and followed Marcus from the shed's shadows across the moonlit yard and through the cabin door, which Marcus had to leave, agape, for Hugh's frame was too grand for its humble architecture, forcing him to bow his head and turn his shoulders to pass through. Once inside, Hugh stood in silent contemplation, his gaze sweeping across the small world Marcus had built. He took in the worn, comfortable furniture, the faces smiling from photographs on the walls, the wood stove that pulsed with the cabin's fiery heart. His expression was an unreadable map, but Marcus dared to believe he saw the glimmer of wonder in his eyes. He led Hugh to the bedroom, where the giant stood framed in the doorway, his eyes tracing the lines of the bed, the panes of the windows, the very air of the space. Then he turned to Marcus, and a sound escaped his lips that was the unmistakable language of gratitude. Well, Marcus deflected, ever clumsy with the weight of emotion. "Couldn't let you turn into an icicle out there. Besides, my legs were getting tired of that walk through the snow." Hugh stepped into the room, a gentle giant claiming his new harbor. He sat upon the bed, and though the frame groaned in protest, it held him fast. He then looked up at Marcus, his eyes soft, and patted the space beside him, a silent, heartfelt invitation. Marcus sat, and a comfortable quiet settled between them like a warm blanket. Then Hugh reached out, his touch on Marcus's shoulder as light as a falling leaf, a careful, deliberate gesture from a being who understood the immense power he held and chose only gentleness. "You are truly welcome here," Marcus said, the sincerity of his own voice surprising him. Truly. That night, Marcus lay awake in his own bed, listening to the new soul of the cabin as Hugh moved through its spaces. He heard the whisper of water from the kitchen, the soft sigh of the refrigerator door Marcus had taught him to open. His footsteps were like a gentle thunder, a rhythm that resonated through the floorboards. Then, at last, A profound silence fell. Sleep had claimed them both. Marcus stared into the darkness above his mind, a whirlwind of unanswerable questions. What had he done? This fragile peace was a fleeting dream, a bubble in time. The snows would eventually surrender to the sun, the road would reappear from its white slumber, and the world would find its way back to his door. A delivery driver, a man from the power company, a neighbor coming to check on the reclusive old man. They would see Hugh. And what then? What tempest would follow? He would find a way. He had to. For in his heart, he knew Hugh was home, and Marcus would become a fortress before he let anyone tear him away. 2 weeks dissolved into the endless white, each day marked only by the ceaseless fall of snow. The cabin's larder began to echo with a growing emptiness, yet there was enough to sustain them for another moon if he rationed with a careful hand. Hugh's was a giant's hunger, and Marcus watched the stores of frozen meat and canned goods dwindle to little more than rice and beans, but no resentment took root in his heart. For in the simple act of cooking for another, in the profound comfort of a shared presence, he found a nourishment his own soul had been starving for. A gentle rhythm began to compose the music of their days. Marcus would awaken to find Hugh already a silent silhouette by the window, a guardian watching the forest greet the dawn. They would share a breakfast of oatmeal, a detail that struck Marcus as a wonderfully strange poetry, a Bigfoot finding comfort in a bowl of warm grains. Hugh became his partner in the daily chores, his immense strength, a gift he could split with a single, graceful strike, a log that would have demanded 10 of Marcus's own, and he cleared the snow with an effortless power, mending the small frailties of the cabin that Marcus's aging body could no longer command. In the evenings, they would find sanctuary in the warm glow of the wood stove. Marcus would lose himself in the pages of old westerns, tales of lone men and vast landscapes by Louis L'Amour and Zane Grey, while Hugh would conjure worlds from wood. He had graduated from wire to carving, and with the old tools Marcus had given him, he learned with a speed that was both beautiful and breathtaking. In a matter of days, he was carving life into blocks of wood, deer, ravens, and wolves, so exquisitely detailed it felt as though their very souls were trapped within the grain, a skill Marcus knew would have taken him a lifetime to even approach. "You have a true gift," Marcus told him one evening, his voice hushed with reverence. Hugh looked up from the form of a salmon he was coaxing from the wood, caught forever in a magnificent leap. A soft sound rumbled in his chest, a melody that could have been humility or perhaps quiet joy. "I truly mean it," Marcus insisted. "These creations, they are more than good. They have a spirit." Hugh carefully set down the carving. He then raised a hand, pointing first to Marcus, then to his own heart, and finally made a gesture as if his two hands were carrying on a quiet, perfect conversation. "You think we're good? Together?" Marcus translated, the truth of it landing softly in his own heart. Yes, I suppose we are." And it was the unvarnished truth. In the 3 long years since Sarah's passing, Hugh was the finest companion Marcus had ever known. He was a creature of few sounds, for words were not his language, but they were not needed. His presence was enough a reason to cook, a life to plan around, another soul to share the silence with. He filled the hollow spaces in the house, and in doing so, he began to fill the hollow spaces in Marcus himself. But peace is often a fleeting season, a quiet interlude before the story turns. It never stays simple. On a Thursday morning, for though the dates had blurred into a seamless drift, he knew it was Thursday by the familiar ache in his spine. One of nature's cruel and punctual jokes, he heard the sound of an engine, a distant growl tearing through the sacred silence. In the hushed stillness of morning, he was in the kitchen, coaxing life into the coffee pot. Hugh, he presumed, was still adrift in the currents of sleep. Then, a sound, born in the distance, began to swell, a mechanical pulse drawing ever nearer, announcing a traveler on their solitary road, the distinct, insistent hum of a snowmobile. A cold stone dropped in the pit of Marcus's stomach, pulling him to the frosted window. The world outside offered no sign, only a blank canvas of white. But the engine's voice was an undeniable truth, growing into a roar that threatened their fragile peace. "Hugh!" The name tore from him as he moved with all the haste his weary frame could muster, crossing the threshold into Hugh's room. He found him awake, sitting upright, the encroaching sound already captured in his gaze. "Someone is coming. You must find a place to hide." Hugh's eyes met his, and in their depths there was no storm of fear, only the calm, quiet waters of a question. "Please!" Marcus implored, his voice a fragile thread. "Only until their shadow has passed from this place. I cannot allow them to lay eyes upon you." For a long searching moment, Hugh studied him, weighing the unspoken terror in his plea. Then, with a slow, deliberate nod, he rose and moved toward the back of the cabin, to the spare closet that would serve as a meager sanctuary, a space that would barely embrace him even when crouched and folded into himself. Marcus waited until the silence confirmed Hugh was concealed, then drifted to the front door, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. The pills sat on the counter, a promise of calm he had no time to claim. Just then, the snowmobile breached the tree line, its engine sighing into silence before the cabin. Sheriff Williams dismounted, a man of 68 years, his mustache now, a silvered memory of its youth, his form softened by time, but he wore the uniform as if it still held the weight of the world. He had been the law here for 30 years, a figure from the life Marcus knew before the quiet, before Sarah. "Marcus!" Williams's voice sliced the frigid air as he removed his helmet. "Felt the need to check on you. The snow has been relentless. With the phone lines down, I had to see for myself that you are still among the living." Marcus stepped over the threshold, pulling the door closed behind him, perhaps with a touch too much urgency. He caught the sheriff's glance, a swift, sharp flicker toward the door, and then back to him, an unspoken question hanging in the air. Well, Marcus stated, the words a shield. "I have what I need. Wood for the fire. I am fine." "You have the look of a man who has forgotten what rest feels like," Williams observed, his tone gentle but his eyes sharp. "Is sleep treating you kindly?" "As kindly as it ever does." Williams's gaze roamed the property, a slow, sweeping survey that paused on the shed, then settled on the tracks imprinted in the snow. They were vast, otherworldly prints, larger than any made by man. Marcus had tried to obscure them, but their story was too deeply etched, too undeniable. "Have you had much to do out here?" Williams asked, the question wrapped in a casualness that felt heavier than stone. "Only the usual chores that mark the passing of the days." "Is that so?" Williams began a slow pilgrimage toward the shed, and with every footfall, Marcus's pulse hammered a more frantic rhythm. "Do you mind if I take a look around? Just want to be sure you're buttoned up tight. We've had reports of bears wandering with a strange fire in them this winter. Aggressive, could be a sickness." "The shed holds nothing but rusted tools and memories," Marcus said, his voice thin against the cold. "All the same." Williams was already at the door, his hand turning the latch, the old wood groaning in protest as it swung open. The shed was a hollow, empty space. Marcus knew it would be. Hugh had not set foot in there for 2 weeks, but a tide of relief so powerful it nearly buckled his knees, washed through him. Williams scanned the interior, his eyes falling upon the rumpled sleeping bags, the small collection of empty cans. His expression shifted, the veil of casual concern falling away. "Marcus, are you giving shelter to someone out here?" "What? No, of course not. This bedding has been used recently, as have these cans." Williams turned to face him fully, his gaze piercing. "Are you in some kind of peril? Is someone casting a shadow over you? Because if that's the truth..." "I am fine," Marcus insisted, his voice firm, a desperate anchor in a swirling sea of lies. "I was sleeping out here myself for a time. The heat in the cabin gave out. I've since repaired it." The sheriff's expression was a tapestry of disbelief. But what could he truly say? Just, if you find yourself needing anything, you make the call. Or you come down to town. Don't try to weather a storm up here by yourself. "I'm not by myself," Marcus heard himself say, the truth slipping its leash. He quickly tried to pull it back. "I mean, I am fine. I prefer the quiet." Williams studied him, a long, silent appraisal. At last, he nodded. "All right, but I'll be back to check on you again next week. The road should be more welcoming by then." He swung a leg over his snowmobile, and the silence was shattered once more by the engine's roar as he turned and disappeared from whence he came. Marcus stood unmoving until the last whisper of the engine had been swallowed by the wilderness. Then he turned and went inside. Hugh was a silent shape in the closet. Marcus gently opened the door. "He is gone," Marcus said, his voice soft in the renewed stillness. "We are safe now." Hugh emerged, his form unfurling as he stretched, a shadow of worry clouding his features, a silent language Marcus had grown fluent in, deciphering the subtle shifts beneath the fur. "He will return," Marcus confessed, the words heavy with resignation. "Williams possesses a will as unyielding as mountain stone, and he senses that something here is not as it seems." From deep within Hugh's chest, a low rumble surfaced, a sound that was both a solemn question and a somber acknowledgement of their truth. "I confess, I cannot see the path forward," Marcus whispered, his voice a fragile thread in the quiet room. "But together, we will find our way." Hugh extended a hand, a bridge between two worlds, and rested it upon Marcus's shoulder with a familiar, tender grace, before drawing him into an embrace woven with caution, as if cradling a soul made of spun glass. And there, his face pressed against the warmth of Hugh's chest, Marcus felt the dam within him finally shatter, unleashing the crushing weight of the solitude he had carried for 3 long years in a torrent of great, shuddering sobs that tore from his depths beyond all command. Hugh simply held him, a steadfast anchor in the storm, while soft sounds emanated from his being a deep, resonant thrumming, like the purr of some ancient, benevolent creature, a vibration of pure solace. "I cannot lose you," Marcus choked out, his words muffled by the thick fur. "I cannot endure it, not this again. I cannot bear to lose another soul I hold dear." In response, Hugh's embrace simply tightened, a silent vow of presence and unwavering protection. For a long, sacred while they remained entwined, the cabin holding them in its warm cradle as snow whispered down outside, a silent benediction upon 2 souls who should never have met, holding fast, because sometimes that is the only prayer that matters. The week that followed was a string stretched taut with apprehension. Every sound became a harbinger of doom for Marcus, the distant drone of an engine, the sharp crack of a frozen branch. Williams's return was a promise hanging in the air like a gathering storm, and with it, the chilling certainty he would not come alone. Hugh, with his silent empathy, felt the tremors of Marcus's fear and retreated into the quiet solitude of his room, a gentle giant trying to shrink from view. But a profound wrongness permeated their existence, casting them as fugitives in their own sanctuary, painting Hugh not as the wonder he was, but as a secret to be shamefully hidden. When Tuesday dawned, a resolve had crystallized within Marcus. He found Hugh in his room, hands in their perpetual, graceful motion, carving wood as if to carve a path for his very thoughts to follow. "There is something we must speak of," Marcus began, his voice heavy with the gravity of his purpose. Hugh stilled his hands, his gaze rising to meet Marcus's, full of patient, silent inquiry. "Williams is coming back, and I fear he will bring men with badges and questions. I cannot deflect," Marcus said. Sinking onto the bed as a wave of pain the medicine could not touch radiated from his back. "When that day comes, they will find you. They will take you from this place, cage you in a world of cold curiosity, and you will never again know the freedom of the sky." Hugh placed his unfinished creation aside, his attention now a singular, unwavering focus on the man before him. "Or," Marcus continued, the words tasting like ash in his mouth, "you could vanish before he returns, flee back into the heart of the forest. I would give you everything I have to aid your journey, to help you find a sanctuary so deep within the wild they could never hope to reach you." A sound tore from Hugh's throat, not of words, but of pure, unyielding negation. "Hugh, my friend, I have no shield strong enough to protect you if they come with the force of the law." Hugh rose to his full, towering height and moved to the window. His hand gestured toward the vast, indifferent wilderness, then pointed a finger first at Marcus and then to his own chest. The silent declaration was as clear as any spoken word. Out there was oblivion. In here with Marcus was life itself. "The thought of you leaving tears at my soul," Marcus confessed, his voice cracking. "But I am lost. I do not know how to be your harbor in this storm." Hugh returned from the window and sat beside him. And then, in a gesture that transcended all that had come before, he reached for Marcus's hand. With infinite care, his immense fingers gently enveloped Marcus's own knotted, aching ones, and he held them in a silent, unbreakable promise. The message flowed between them, unspoken yet absolute. Together, whatever darkness was descending, they would meet it as one. "All right," Marcus breathed, his voice raw with a fragile, renewed hope. "All right, we will find a way." Yet, the path remained shrouded in shadow, and the hourglass of their time together was draining with a merciless speed. Thursday arrived with a cruel dawn, its light shattered by the growl of engines, not one, but many. Marcus rushed to the window, and a glacial cold seized his heart, freezing the very blood in his veins. 3 snowmobiles carved through the snow, bearing Williams and 2 deputies. Trailing them, a heavy truck clawed its way up the mountain pass, a testament to a path brutally cleared for this very purpose. They had come not with suspicion, but with undeniable intent. "Hugh," Marcus called out, his voice a low, somber bell. "Our uninvited guests have arrived." Hugh materialized in the frame of the door, his gaze falling upon the vehicles like the first snowflakes of a coming blizzard. His features remained a placid mask, yet Marcus, now fluent in the silent language of his friend, read the quiet surrender in his eyes, the somber understanding that their borrowed time had at last run out. "Stay here, in the quiet of our world," Marcus whispered, his voice a fragile shield. "Let me be the one to face them." He stepped out into the biting air, a world of white and blue now marred by intrusion. Williams stood dismounted from his snowmobile, a statue of authority. Beside him, two deputies, young men in their late 20s, poised with hands hovering near the cold steel at their belts. Then, a truck door side opened, and from it emerged Dr. Martinez, his own physician, her presence here, a question that echoed in the vast, silent wilderness. Marcus Williams began, his voice cutting through the stillness with a heavy, deliberate calm. A conversation is long overdue. What is there to speak of, Jim? Marcus returned, his words a thin veil over the tempest in his soul. About the secret you've been keeping within the four walls of that cabin. A frantic drum began to beat against Marcus's ribs. I'm afraid your meaning is lost on me, he lied, the words tasting of ash. Don't do this, old friend, Williams pleaded, his tone softened by a shared history. For 20 years I've known you, and your heart has always been too honest for deceit. Dr. Martinez has spoken of your prescriptions. The deliveries have doubled enough sustenance for 2 souls. And the snow, Marcus, the snow tells a story of tracks that belong to no creature of this earth. One of the deputies, a younger Martinez, no kin to the doctor, began a slow, deliberate advance toward the cabin. In a heartbeat, Marcus moved, planting himself before the door, a lone sentinel at the gate. Do you carry a warrant to cross this threshold? He challenged, his voice low and resonant with defiance. The only permission I need, you gave me yourself, Williams answered, a note of sorrow in his voice. Just 3 months past, you asked us to check on your welfare, fearing a fall in the lonely quiet. That very concern now grants me the right to enter, to ensure that you are, indeed, safe. My well-being is not in question, Marcus stated, his gaze unyielding. Then, you'll have no objection to us confirming that for ourselves. For a span of 10 heartbeats, the world held its breath in a silent tableau. Then, a sound from behind him, the soft groan of a door yielding shattered the stillness, and Marcus turned to face the inevitable. And there, framed by the doorway, stood Hugh, a being of impossible grace. A ripple of fear sent the deputies' hands flying to their holsters, but Williams raised a steadying palm. Hold your fire, he commanded, his voice a lifeline in a sea of shock. Just wait. Time itself seemed to freeze. Hugh remained, a towering figure of 8 impossible feet, stooping gently beneath the doorframe. His ancient eyes swept over the armed men, rested on Marcus with a deep and knowing calm, and finally met the gaze of Williams. Sweet heavens, a deputy breathed. The words, a ghost of vapor in the frigid air. What in God's name is it? His name is Hugh, Marcus announced, a surprising well of strength rising in his voice, clear and unwavering. He is my guest. Dr. Martinez stared, the physician's wonder eclipsing her initial shock. Marcus, she began, her voice a mixture of awe and inquiry. How long has he been with you? For 3 weeks, he has shared my home. I drew him from the icy grasp of Frozen Heart Lake, where he was perishing. And before the questions pour forth yes, a profound intelligence shines within him. Yes, he comprehends our every word. And no, you will not take him from this place. Williams took a cautious step forward, his gaze fixed upon the impossible creature. Marcus, this being. I have no words for what it is, but it must be secured, understood. We have a duty to inform. His name is Hugh, Marcus repeated, each word a stone laid in a foundation of resolve, and his place is here, with me. That is a choice that rests far beyond your authority, Marcus. This is my home, and my heart, Marcus retorted, his voice raw with conviction. There is no higher authority here. A low, resonant sound then issued from Hugh's throat, drawing every eye. He moved with a slow, deliberate grace, descending the porch steps not toward the men, but to the space beside Marcus, coming to rest at his side like an ancient, loyal shadow. The gesture was a silent, unshakable vow. Where one stood, so stood the other. Listen to me, Williams implored, his voice straining for reason. I can see that you have forged a bond, but this moment is larger than the two of you. This creature represents a discovery for all of humankind, a truth that what? Marcus cut in, his voice ringing with passion, belongs in a government ledger, in the halls of some distant university. He breathes, Jim. He feels. He is a person, though not of our kind, and I will not stand by and watch you put him in a cage. It would not be a cage, Williams countered, his words careful and measured. It would be a secure facility, a place where he could be, to a place where the sky becomes a forgotten memory, a concrete box where they will dissect his soul with their curiosity, where he will be a puzzle to be solved until his light is extinguished. I have witnessed the cold mercy of their proper facilities. Sarah was held in one, the finest institution in the state, and they saw her not as a woman, but as a collection of symptoms. I will not condemn Hugh to that same hollow echo of a life. A veil of sorrow passed over Williams's face. Marcus, I beg you, let reason be your guide. Reason is all I have left. You are the ones who have brought the shadow of violence to the doorstep of an innocent. That is a truth we cannot yet know, Deputy Martinez countered, his voice drawn tight. That being could harbor a tempest we cannot possibly comprehend. His name is Hugh. The words tore from Marcus's soul, a raw shout against the fragile peace. And the only true danger here is the one you carry in your hands. A gentle weight, a calming presence, settled upon Marcus's shoulder. It was Hugh. Marcus turned, and in Hugh's eyes he saw a universe of sad resignation, a quiet acceptance of a fate he did not deserve. A soft, mournful sound escaped him, and then he stepped into the space between them, toward the very heart of the conflict, toward Williams. The deputy's weapons rose in a single metallic breath. Do not take another step. Yet Hugh continued his slow, deliberate pilgrimage, his hands held open as a testament to peace. He was a silent poem of non-aggression. He came to a halt before Williams, and for a moment the world held its breath, the weary lawman and the creature born of impossible dreams, locked in a silent communion. Then Hugh did something that stole the very air from Marcus's lungs. He knelt. He lowered himself, first to one knee, then to both, a deliberate act of diminishing his own stature, of offering his vulnerability as a shield. He brought himself to eye level with Williams and held out his hands, wrists together, in the ancient, universal gesture of surrender. No, Marcus breathed, the word a shattered prayer. Hugh, please don't. But Hugh's gaze was fixed upon Williams, a direct and soulful plea that needed no words, and from him came a sound that every heart understands, a single, aching note that meant, asterisk, please, asterisk. Asterisk, please, do not let your fear bring him harm. Please, grant him the sanctuary he has found. Please, see the soul within me. Asterisk. The moment stretched, thin and shimmering as a moonbeam. Williams gazed into Hugh's eyes, and what he found there was not a monster, but a person, luminous and clear. Then his eyes shifted to Marcus, to an old friend hollowed by grief, who had somehow, against all odds, found a new reason for his heart to beat. God damn it all, Williams whispered to the wind. He turned to his men, his voice heavy with the gravity of his choice. Lower your weapons. But Sheriff, I said, stand down. That's an order. With a deep and shared reluctance, the barrels of their rifles dipped toward the earth. Williams's gaze returned to the kneeling figure. Stand up. With a quiet grace that seemed to defy the laws of his own being, Hugh rose. Do you understand the words I'm saying? Williams asked, his voice softer now. A slow, deliberate nod was his silent answer. Are you here by your own free will? Is Marcus your guardian, not your captor? Again, the quiet affirmation of his head. And you mean no one any harm? There is no storm of violence waiting inside you? Hugh shook his head, a swift and emphatic motion that banished all doubt. A long silence fell as Williams weighed the impossible truth. Finally, he spoke. Marcus, go on inside. Take your friend with you. Jim, just do as I say. From the sanctuary of the cabin, Marcus and Hugh bore witness through the glass pane, their gazes fixed upon the unfolding drama outside, where a tempest of words brewed between Williams, his deputies, and Dr. Martinez, a silent film of impassioned gestures and escalating tensions. When the storm of their debate at last subsided, Williams turned from the others and approached the cabin's threshold, a solitary figure whose knock echoed with the weight of the moment. With a heart that beat a somber rhythm against his ribs, Marcus unlatched the door, opening it to face the consequence of their discovery. This is the path we'll walk from here, Williams began, his voice a low, steady current in the quiet air. The official story, the one etched in ink, will read that I ascended this mountain, found you well, and noted nothing more than the curious imprints of a bear in the soft earth. That is the truth the world will know. Jim, Marcus started, his voice a fragile whisper of protest. And unofficially, Williams pressed on, his gaze cutting through the pretense, the soul dwelling within these walls. I have no memory of him. None of us do. But you must grasp the delicate thread we're walking, Marcus. Should this secret escape into the wind, my hands will be bound. This is a singular gift, a testament to the good man I know you to be, and because his eyes drifted past Marcus, finding Hugh in the shadows. Because a part of me believes your heart speaks the truth, that he is a being far beyond the realm of a simple beast. Thank you, Marcus breathed, the words carrying the immense weight of a gratitude too profound for mere language to capture. Your thanks are not what I require, Williams countered, his face a mask of solemnity. Only your promise to keep him cloaked in secrecy. And Marcus, should this fragile peace be shattered, should any harm befall another soul, should even a whisper of trouble arise, it will not come to pass, Marcus vowed, his voice an anchor of certainty. Let us pray that your word holds true, Williams murmured, the unspoken warning lingering in the mountain air. And with that, Williams departed, his vehicle a receding shadow, followed by the others in a slow procession down the winding mountain path. Marcus and Hugh remained framed in the doorway, silent sentinels watching until the last glint of metal vanished and the forest reclaimed its silence. Only then did Marcus turn his gaze to Hugh. From this day forward, our every step must be taken with a whisper's care, he said, his voice imbued with a newfound gravity. Hugh offered a solemn nod of understanding, and then, with a tenderness that belied his immense form, he drew Marcus into an embrace where a silent story of profound relief was told. A fragile reprieve had been granted, a stroke of fortune Marcus recognized with chilling clarity. Williams, a man of principle, had bent the world's rigid rules for them just this once, and such a miracle would not be repeated. The future now demanded a deeper wisdom, a more vigilant watchfulness. Yet, in the quiet aftermath, a simple, sacred truth remained. They were sheltered from the storm, their lives intertwined, and in that moment, this sanctuary of two was the entire world. The ensuing weeks unfolded in a hush, a stillness so profound it felt like the held breath before a storm. Marcus lived on a knife's edge of anticipation, his ears tuned for the arrival of men who cataloged the world's impossibilities. But the mountain remained undisturbed, and no one ever came. As winter's grasp loosened its icy fingers, letting the snow weep into the earth, Marcus resumed his weekly pilgrimage to town. He was a solitary figure on these journeys, weaving a tale for curious eyes of a man content in his quiet communion with the wilderness, a story accepted without question. Hugh, meanwhile, remained the cabin's secret heart. Marcus had revealed to him the sanctuary beneath the floorboards, a hidden hollow where he learned to melt into the shadows in less than 30 seconds, a silent promise of protection. For the most part, however, their days settled into a rhythm so gentle and familiar it almost felt ordinary. They shared dawns over breakfast, labored together in the light of day, and spent evenings in the warm glow of the wood stove, one lost in pages, the other in shaping wood, content to simply share the same sacred air. And it was a profound goodness, a light that filled spaces in Marcus's soul that had been dark for years. The familiar aches remained, but they were now background noise to a life with purpose, a reason to dream of a tomorrow instead of merely surviving today. In the quiet chambers of his heart, Marcus knew that Hugh had become his kin, a wondrous, impossible branch on his family tree, but family all the same. It was on a Tuesday, under the weeping gray skies of late March, that Marcus made his way into town. With the rain serving as a curtain against the world, he went in search of provisions, especially meat, for Hugh's appetite was as vast as the wilderness he came from. He was navigating the familiar aisles of the general store, his cart a vessel of their continued existence, when fragments of a conversation between two men drifted to him like a chilling premonition. I swear on my life, I witnessed it. One of them insisted. A young man of perhaps 30 years, clad in the earth tones of a hunter, far up the mountain, beyond the shores of Frozen Heart Lake, a shadow moving through the trees, too immense for any bear, and it moved upon two legs. The whiskey was probably telling you stories, his companion scoffed with a dismissive wave. My mind was clear as the mountain air, the hunter retorted, his voice earnest. The sun was high. I even captured an image, though it's a ghost on the screen. But my eyes do not lie. I know the truth of what I saw. A river of ice flowed through Marcus's veins. He drifted closer to the source of the words, his movements a slow, deliberate dance of feigned interest in the silent rows of canned goods. So let's imagine your tale is true, the skeptic conceded, a cynical edge to his tone. What action does a man take against a shadow in the woods? I'll carry the story to the Forest Service, the hunter declared. Perhaps gather a party. A creature of that legend, if it truly breathes our air, it represents a king's ransom. The men who preserve such trophies would offer thousands, hell, perhaps even millions for such a prize. You've wandered off the map of reason, my friend, the other man said, shaking his head. Could it truly be me? For generations, whispers of Bigfoot have echoed through these very mountains. What if the legend breathes? What if fate has chosen me to be the one to unveil the truth? In that instant, Marcus abandoned his cart, its contents forgotten, and strode from the store, a storm of dread gathering within him as he climbed into his truck and raced homeward, far too fast for the slick, rain-swept roads. Hugh stood in the quiet sanctuary of the kitchen when the front door flew open and Marcus burst in. He glanced up from the simple art of the sandwich he was crafting, a culinary marvel Hugh had come to believe was humanity's finest creation, his eyes filled with a silent, searching question. "We have a storm on the horizon," Marcus breathed, his voice heavy with the weight of the world. As the story of the whispers in town tumbled from Marcus's lips, Hugh listened with an ancient stillness. While his face remained a stoic mask, his hands ceased their work, the half-made sandwich resting, a forgotten piece of a world now irrevocably changed. "They will come searching," Marcus continued, the words catching in his throat. "Men with rifles, perhaps worse. And if their eyes should ever fall upon you," a profound silence stretched between them before Hugh drifted to the window, his gaze sweeping over the sheltering embrace of the forest, across the majestic peaks that stood as silent sentinels toward the very soul of his freedom. "I understand," Marcus whispered, his heart aching. "I know this world is woven into your soul, but perhaps the time has come to seek a new sanctuary, a place where their world cannot touch you. The deep, untouched wilderness. Perhaps Canada. A place of true safety." Hugh turned from the window, his gaze meeting Marcus's, and from his chest came a low, resonant sound, a clear and unwavering refusal. "Hugh, you must understand, if they were to capture you—" He closed the distance between them, his large, gentle hands enveloping Marcus's, holding them with a strength that spoke not of power, but of an unbreakable bond. It was the same silent promise as before, together. "I cannot be your shield when the hunt begins," Marcus confessed, his voice fracturing with sorrow. "I am just one old man. What strength have I against men armed with steel and fire?" Hugh raised a hand, pointing first to Marcus, then to his own heart. He then shaped his hands into a sheltering roof above them. The message was as clear as the mountain air. This was his home. Marcus was his home, and he would not be driven from it. "You are as stubborn as the ancient stone of these mountains," Marcus said, a faint, weary smile touching his lips. "Do you know that?" A low, rumbling murmur escaped Hugh's throat, a sound that carried the unmistakable tone of quiet affirmation. "So be it. Then we must move like shadows. The sun can no longer be your companion. You will not step beyond this door, not even onto the porch until darkness falls. And when I command you to vanish, you will become one with the earth. There can be no debate." Hugh gave a slow, deliberate nod, sealing the pact. A wave of exhaustion crashed over Marcus, and he sank into a chair at the kitchen table. A fire of pain screamed along his spine, and his heart hammered a frantic rhythm against his ribs, a tempest too great for a man in the winter of his years. With gentle purpose, Hugh completed his sandwich. He then crafted another, placing it before Marcus like a humble offering, before taking his seat across the table. They ate in a shared silence, a quiet communion that needed no words. Beyond the window, the rain continued its steady rhythm, a silver curtain washing away the final remnants of snow. Spring was stirring, and with its awakening would come the curious, the adventurous, the hunters, a rising tide of humanity that brought 1,000 more chances for discovery. Marcus gazed at his companion, this miraculous, impossible friend who had chosen this fragile sanctuary over the vast, safe, unknown, who had placed the entirety of his existence in the weathered hands of one old man. "We will find a way through this," Marcus murmured. The words, a prayer, meant more for his own trembling heart than for Hugh. "We always have." Yet, for the first time, a cold shard of doubt pierced the warmth of his hope. The hunter arrived 3 days hence. It was a sound that announced him first, the mechanical snarl of an ATV tearing through the sacred quiet of the afternoon. Marcus was outdoors, the sharp bite of the axe echoing the protest in his back with every swing when the alien noise invaded his world. "Hugh!" he cried out, his voice a blade of pure urgency. "Into the shadows! Now!" He heard a swift, powerful rustle from within the cabin, the familiar groan of the trap door opening, and then a profound, absolute stillness. Marcus lowered the axe to the earth and waited, a statue of forced calm. The machine roared into view, carrying the same man from the general store. A hunting rifle was slung across his back. A camera dangled from his neck like a trophy yet to be won. He silenced the engine, and the world fell quiet once more as he dismounted. "Good afternoon," the man's voice rang out, cloaked in a casual warmth. "You must be Marcus Thompson?" And who might be the one asking? "The name is Blake Miller. I'm following some tracks through these parts. Word is, you keep to yourself up here. Figured you might have laid eyes on some of the more unique creatures this wilderness has to offer. That word, unusual, is a vessel that holds a universe of meanings depending on who speaks it." Miller summoned a ghost from the glass of his phone. He presented Marcus with a photograph, a hazy image, captured from afar, yet its subject was undeniably immense, unquestionably bipedal, and unquestionably a whisper too close to Hugh's fragile sanctuary. This specter appeared just 2 days past, Miller murmured, a mere 5 miles north of this very spot. Whatever it is, its stature is profound. Has such a presence ever crossed your path? Bears, Marcus replied, his voice as weathered as the ancient pines. They are a constant verse in the mountain's long song. They rise on their hind legs, you see, casting illusions of grandeur from a distance. This was no illusion. This was not a bear. In these woods, every shadow wears the shape of a bear until the light proves its true form. Miller's gaze lingered on him. You speak with a conviction that feels carved from stone. I have woven 20 years of my life into the very fabric of these mountains. I know the rhythm of what breathes here and the profound silence of what does not. And what does not breathe here are the phantoms and fables you chase. Oh-hoo! The sound was a quiet dismissal as Miller began a slow pilgrimage toward the cabin. But Marcus became a bulwark, a living boundary planted in his path. This ground you stand on is private land, Marcus stated, his voice a low and steady rumble. I only wish to read the story left in the earth, to see if any tracks betray a secret presence, or do you have something to conceal, old man? I have a right to the sanctity of my solitude, and you have no right to trespass upon it without my blessing. A silent war was waged in the space between them. Miller, a vessel of youth, strength, and steel. Marcus, a monument to time, his body a map of aches and years. And yet, he did not yield. At last, Miller retreated a step. Fine, but I will return, and not alone. And if there is a secret hidden in these heights, we will draw it into the light. I wish you fortune in your quest for ghosts. Miller mounted his ATV, its engine shattering the peace. You should know, he called out over the mechanical roar, there's a king's ransom for proof of a legend. Serious money. If you're harboring a truth, you're letting a fortune turn to dust. My soul requires a different kind of wealth, Marcus answered to the fading sound. Miller vanished, his engines growl dissolving into the vast, breathing silence. Only then did Marcus retreat into his wooden shell, lifting the hidden door to the earth below. The storm has passed. Hugh ascended from the dark, a gentle giant cloaked in the dust of his confinement. His eyes, deep pools of ancient worry, sought Marcus's. He will be back, Marcus breathed, the words heavy with certainty. And he may bring the world with him. We must chart a new course. They spent the next hour weaving possibilities from whispers and silence. Or rather, Marcus wove the words, and Hugh listened, his great head nodding or shaking, offering his heart's counsel without a sound. The first path. Hugh would melt back into the deep, green mystery of the wilderness, a ghost returning to his home, leaving Marcus to a solitude that would now feel like an amputation. A choice that would shatter them both. The second path. They would flee together. A shared exodus toward the northern wilds of Canada, to some forgotten corner where lives are not questioned. But Marcus's bones were too weary for such a pilgrimage. And Hugh, he could never truly be invisible. Eventually, a curious eye would see. A nervous tongue would speak. And so, the third and final path. They would remain. They would anchor themselves here and hope Miller's hunt would grow cold, hope the world would forget this small, sacred peak, hope against hope they could shield a miracle forever. It was less a plan and more a fragile prayer cast into the wind, but it was all the hope they had to hold. That night, sleep was a distant shore Marcus could not reach. He lay adrift in his bed, staring into the darkness, listening to the cabin breathe with Hugh's quiet life. The floorboards sang a familiar, groaning lullaby under his weight. Then came the soft whisper of a blade on wood. Hugh, when his heart was troubled, would speak through his hand. At 2 a.m, Marcus surrendered. He rose and found Hugh in the living room, bathed in the amber glow of a single lamp, coaxing a soul from a piece of wood. It was Marcus, a perfect, miniature echo of him, sitting in his favorite chair, a book open in his hands. The detail was a testament of love, every wrinkle etched by time, every strand of gray hair, the reading glasses Hugh had seen him wear. He'd even captured the specific way Marcus slumped when his back ached. "That's me," Marcus whispered, his voice filled with a sacred awe. Hugh looked up from his work, his eyes luminous in the soft light, and held out the carving, a silent offering, a piece of his heart given form. You made this beautiful thing for me?" A slow, solemn nod was Hugh's silent reply. As Marcus's hands accepted the gift, he felt not just its physical weight, but the immense weight of the care carved into every intricate line. "Thank you," he breathed, his voice catching. It is truly beautiful." A low, gentle sound escaped Hugh's lips before he turned his attention back to the wood, his hands already shaping a new, unseen mystery that Marcus could not yet decipher. "We are going to be all right," Marcus whispered the words. A fragile prayer meant as much for his own trembling heart as for Hugh's. "Whatever storm comes for us, we'll weather it as one, won't we?" Hugh's gaze met his, and in those impossibly human depths, Marcus witnessed a truth that shattered his soul, a profound and ancient doubt. For Hugh held no such illusion of safety. He could feel the ending drawing near, a tide he knew would eventually overwhelm them, that the hunter's relentless nature would one day win, and the final grains of their borrowed time would slip through the glass. And yet, he remained, anchored by a truth deeper than any fear. That home was never a shelter of wood and stone, but a sanctuary found in a kindred soul. And Marcus was his home. "Yes," Marcus affirmed, his voice a thread of quiet resolve. "Together." And so they sat, bathed in the warm, fleeting glow of the lamplight, an old man and a creature of myth, two souls bound by a shared, unspoken knowledge of the encroaching darkness and a mutual choice to stand against it as one. Beyond their fragile circle of light, the forest held its breath, a vast and profound darkness where unseen forces were stirring, where cruel designs were being woven, and the hunt was being meticulously arranged. This precious, fragile silence was never meant to last an eternity. The following week, the outside world began to press in. Not with the crash of rifles, but with the quiet knock of bureaucracy. It was the Forest Service men whose faces were ghosts from Marcus's past, arriving with carefully worded inquiries about aberrations in the wilderness, signs of predators beyond the known, and tracks that belonged to no earthly creature. With a practiced ease that pained his heart, Marcus wove a tapestry of deceit, speaking of nothing more than the familiar dance of bears and deer. As they surveyed his small domain while Hugh held his breath in the suffocating dark of the crawl space, their eyes found nothing, and they departed, leaving a hollow echo of suspicion behind. Next came the men of science, seeking to map the journeys of great beasts. They spoke of placing unblinking eyes in the trees, remote, motion-triggered sentinels. Marcus pleaded for the sanctity of his solitude, but they countered with the cold logic of maps, informing him their cameras would be installed, with or without his blessing. A mere 3 days passed before Marcus discovered them on his twilight walk, 6 silent predators of glass and wire, arranged in a deliberate tightening circle around his life, each lens a cold eye aimed inward, waiting to capture the soul of a thing that was never meant to be proven. He returned to the cabin, the weight of this new reality heavy on his shoulders, and shared the devastating news with Hugh. The world outside was now forbidden territory, the moonlit clearings and whispering pines lost to them, for the risk had become an insurmountable mountain. Hugh received this verdict with a profound stillness, his silence a vessel for an ocean of sorrow as he gazed upon the forest. That was his birthright, now a paradise lost, denied him by the insatiable human need for proof, the desire to possess what is wild, and the urge to transform wonder into wealth. Later that night, Marcus discovered a heart-wrenching sight. Hugh, in a desperate attempt to shrink his own existence, folding himself into the shadows of corners, moving through their small home as if willing himself to dissolve into the very wood and plaster of the walls. "Hey now." Marcus's voice was a soft, anchoring sound in the quiet room. "Hugh, please, stop." Hugh turned to him, and in his gaze was the raw, frantic energy of a trapped and beautiful thing. "You are not a burden," Marcus insisted, his words a fierce shield against Hugh's despair. "You are not a secret to be hidden away. This place is your home and your right to breathe. The air on this earth is as sacred as any other being's." A sound welled up from deep within Hugh, a low and mournful note that spoke of a sorrow too vast for words. Marcus sank to the floorboards, a choice his aching back would curse him for, but a sacrifice dwarfed by the moment. "Sarah used to tell me, back when the sickness was taking her, 'Marcus, my love, you cannot carry the whole world.' And I'd say I wasn't trying to carry the world, only her. And she would laugh this beautiful soft laugh and call me her fool. Then she'd take my hand, and we would carry the weight together." He looked deep into Hugh's sorrowful eyes. "And that is what I am saying to you now. We will carry this burden together. You are not alone in this. And I will not let them take you from me. Not ever." With a slow, deliberate grace, Hugh reached out, drawing Marcus into an embrace of profound, gentle strength. And there they remained on the worn wooden floor, two souls clinging to one another as if they were the last two survivors in a world sinking beneath the waves. And perhaps, in the truest sense of the word, they were. The end arrived with the rising sun on a Saturday morning, announced not by the song of birds, but by the growl of engines, a chorus of them that pulled Marcus from sleep. When he peered through the window, his heart ceased to beat in his chest. 7 formidable trucks and 2 all-terrain vehicles scarred the earth. Blake Miller stood among them, flanked by more than a dozen men, each clad in the uniform of the hunt. And leading this grim procession was a man in a suit, an emissary of government or corporation, and Marcus couldn't decide which was the more terrifying omen. Marcus moved to Hugh's room, his steps heavy with dread. "They're here," he said, the words, a stark and simple epitaph. "The world has come for us." But Hugh was already awake, already aware. His extraordinary senses had surely captured the distant rumble long before it reached Marcus's tired ears, a final, terrible symphony heralding their arrival. A single, desperate hope escaped Marcus's lips, a whisper meant to carve a path to safety, the crawl space. Immediately. Yet Hugh remained rooted to the spot, his gaze meeting Marcus's with a profound and tranquil stillness, as if a great, internal river had at last found its sea. It was the look of a soul that had reached its final verdict, a silent acknowledgement of a destiny long foreseen and finally embraced. "Hugh, I am begging you." A slow, deliberate shake of his head was Hugh's reply. And then, a miracle and a heartbreak all at once, he spoke. Or rather, he wove sound into meaning. A sound born of vocal cords not meant for human words, from a mouth that could not shape the familiar edges of our language. Yet the intention was as clear as a star in the winter sky. "No more run. No more running." The words hung in the air, a declaration of freedom. Hugh Marcus's voice cracked, a name turned into a plea. With a grace that defied his form, Hugh moved toward the door, toward the heart of the cabin, toward the chorus of men outside whose only desire was to chain him, to dissect him, to possess the wonder that he was. Marcus's hand shot out, a desperate anchor on his friend's arm. "Don't, please. We can vanish in the shadows. We can wait until the world forgets. We can..." Hugh turned, and in the deep, knowing universe of his eyes, Marcus saw the truth. Hugh was finished with the shadows. He was weary of being a secret, a shame. He was done with the pretense of non-existence. He was choosing to be seen, to be known, on his own sacred terms, before that very choice could be stolen from him. A soft curse, more of a surrender than an oath, fell from Marcus's lips. God damn it. Then a breath of resolve. All right. But we crossed this threshold together. They walked to the door as two souls with one purpose. Marcus turned the knob, and they stepped out into the fractured light. Hugh, a towering shadow at his back. The world erupted. A cacophony of shouts. The cold, metallic click of weapons being raised. A voice tearing through the chaos, screaming, "Don't move!" while another cried, "Get a shot!" The night was shattered by the silent violence of camera flashes and the unblinking red eyes of recording devices, all orchestrated by the man in the suit, barking his commands. There on the porch, Hugh stood, a towering 8 feet of beautiful impossibility. He did not flee. He did not shrink into the shadow. He simply was a being of profound dignity, utterly present, undeniably real. And Marcus stepped before him, a shield of flesh and bone, placing himself between Hugh and the muzzles of the guns. "Lower your weapons," he commanded, his voice a pillar of calm in the storm he felt raging inside him. "Marcus, get out of the way." It was Miller, his voice strained with fear and duty. "That thing is dangerous." "His name is Hugh," Marcus replied, each word a stone laid in a foundation of truth. "And there is no danger in him. He has shared my home for 2 months. If he harbored any wish to harm, I would be a distant memory." "It is not human," the man in the suit declared, his voice devoid of warmth. "It has no rights. Now, step aside, or you will be charged with obstruction." "Charged by whom?" "This is my land you stand on. All of you. You have come without a warrant, without my blessing. You are trespassers here." "We have the authority," the suit began, his confidence a brittle thing. "What you have," Marcus cut in, his voice a blade of quiet steel, "is a weapon and an inflated title. That is the uniform of power, not the soul of authority." The familiar rumble of Sheriff Williams's truck was a welcome prayer answered. Marcus felt a wave of relief wash over him as Williams emerged, his eyes taking in the tableau of conflict, his expression becoming a mask of careful neutrality. "Can someone tell me what's unfolding here?" Williams asked, his voice carrying the weight of the law he truly served. The suit turned, addressing the sheriff with an air of superiority. "Sheriff, this man is harboring an unclassified species, potentially a threat. We are here to secure the asset for study." "Secure it?" Williams's gaze drifted to Hugh, then to Marcus, who stood as his guardian. "From where I'm standing, it looks like they're just standing, not causing a bit of trouble to anyone." "This is a matter of national interest. This is a matter of a man protecting his home," Williams stated. his voice unwavering. "And until you can produce a piece of paper that says I'm wrong, I am ordering every last one of you to lower your weapons and vacate this property. You have no jurisdiction. This land falls under my watch," Williams declared, his voice a blade of tempered steel. "And by my reckoning, menacing one of its own is a trespass akin to assault. Now, I implore you to lower those instruments of violence, or I shall begin the solemn duty of taking you into custody." A storm of fury gathered in the suited man's eyes, but after a breath that held an eternity, he gave a curt, reluctant gesture. With heavy sighs, the men lowered their rifles. Miller's jaw was set, a silent argument raging on his lips, but Williams's hand, resting with quiet purpose upon his sidearm, spoke a language of finality that needed no words. "This chapter is far from closed," the man in the suit whispered to Marcus, his voice a low promise of a coming storm. "We will return, fortified with the full weight of authority. And upon that day, I shall be armed with counsel," Marcus countered, his spirit unbent. "Then we shall truly see what manner of decree grants one the right to seize a soul that thinks and feels. It possesses no soul to seize. It is but a creature of instinct, an animal." "Then why does such a tremor of fear follow in his wake?" Marcus questioned, his voice resonating with profound truth. "Simple creatures do not inspire this kind of dread. This is a fear born of facing another person, another mind. And I tell you, Hugh holds more humanity in his heart than many men I have had the misfortune to know." The suited man's gaze, sharp and cold, shifted from Marcus's defiant face to the silent figure of Hugh. And Hugh met that stare, not with aggression, but with a profound and unwavering calm, an ancient stillness that could not be shaken. "Our presence here is concluded. For now," the man conceded at last, the words tasting like ash. "But the echoes of this conversation will long remain." And so they retreated, a slow and grudging procession, their trucks carving paths of dust down the mountain's spine. In their wake, Marcus, Hugh, and Williams stood as silent sentinels, watching the tide of malice recede. When the last rumble of their engines had faded into the vast silence of the woods, Williams turned his gaze to Marcus. "That was a fool's gambit." "Perhaps it was," Marcus admitted with a weary sigh. "They will return, armed not just with weapons, but with the labyrinth of the law, perhaps even with the might of the federal government. My shield can only extend so far." "That is a truth I understand completely." Williams's eyes fell upon Hugh, a question forming on his lips. Does he times comprehend my words?" "Yes," Marcus affirmed, his voice soft but certain. "He understands everything." "Then it is settled." William spoke then not to Marcus, but directly to the soul standing beside him. "Your origins are a mystery to me, and perhaps they shall remain so. But know this, if any harm befalls Marcus, or any other soul in this valley, I will pursue you to the ends of the earth. Is that understood?" Hugh inclined his head in a slow, deliberate nod, an unspoken oath passing between them. "So be it." With a final, weary nod, Williams returned to his vehicle. But before the engine turned over, his voice cut through the quiet air one last time. "Marcus, walk carefully in the days to come, and for the love of all that is holy, find yourself a champion of the law. I will not fail in that." They retreated into the sanctuary of the cabin, where the fire of adrenaline ebbed away, leaving behind the trembling tide of its aftermath. A tremor ran through Marcus, his back a knot of pain, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs as he collapsed into the worn embrace of his recliner. In the quiet that followed, Hugh knelt beside him, placing a gentle, steadying hand upon Marcus's shoulder, a silent anchor in a turbulent sea. "The storm has passed, but the sky is not yet clear," Marcus murmured, his voice thin. "They will gather their strength and return. It may be a matter of days, or perhaps only a few turns of the clock." A low, resonant sound rose from Hugh's chest, a note of solemn agreement. "And yet, is it not a strange thing?" Marcus mused, a fragile smile touching his lips. "A part of my soul feels relief, a lightness, now that the secret is a secret no more. I am glad to be free of the shadows of deceit, and even more glad that you no longer have to dwell within them." Hugh inclined his head, his ancient eyes posing a silent, gentle question. "Because to conceal you felt like an admission of some wrongdoing," Marcus explained, his voice thick with emotion. "As if your very existence was a thing of shame. But you are not shameful. You are simply you. And in a just world, that would be, and should be, more than enough." Another sound escaped Hugh, softer this time, a complex chord that sang of gratitude, of a burden lifted, or perhaps of both woven into one. And so they sat in the profound stillness of the cabin, bathed in the golden light of the fading afternoon. Two souls, born of different worlds, an impossible union that nonetheless breathed and was. Two hearts that had chosen one another against the deafening chorus of a world that declared their bond forbidden. And in that quiet moment, a fragile hope took root in Marcus's heart. Asterisk, perhaps this is not our end. Perhaps this is a battle we can wage. Perhaps the dignity of a single, true connection is a treasure more precious than the cold comfort of safety. Asterisk. Or perhaps, he mused, they were merely two magnificent fools, their hearts vast and untamed, forever spilling over the confines of reason. It was a sentiment his Sarah would have understood and lovingly chided him for in the very same breath. Come what may, Marcus would not alter a single thread of this tapestry. Not one solitary moment, for Hugh was a truth that mattered. And this, their shared existence, was a sacred vow. Sometimes you must become a pillar for what you believe, even if the weight of it all promises to bring you to your knees. Let the world unleash its fury. Let the tides of judgment rise against them. They would stand as one, a fortress of two souls against the storm. On a day kissed by the first light of a new week, the lawyer appeared. Her name was Alexis Garcia, a woman of 43 years, with an intellect as keen and cutting as shattered crystal, who had journeyed up from Denver with a briefcase brimming with legal history and an unyielding will. Williams had spoken her name, whispering of a champion for the lost causes, for the rights of the earth, the voices of ancient peoples, and the very cases where the rigid lines of the law blurred into the complex hues of life. So, she began. Her voice a calm current as she settled at Marcus's kitchen table, her gaze falling upon the silent figure of Hugh, a silhouette against the window's light. This is the soul we've come to defend. His name is Hugh, Marcus corrected, his tone a gentle but firm reclamation of identity. He is Hugh. Hugh, she echoed, the name settling in the air as she drew forth a legal tablet. Is there a bridge of understanding between us? Can you grasp the intricate tapestries of thought and reason? With a grace that belied his formidable presence, Hugh moved to the table, the old chair sighing under his weight, as he, Saturday. He reached for her pen, his immense hands, instruments of surprising delicacy, cradling it with care as he drew upon the stark white page a story in ink, a simple, elegant sketch of a bird soaring on currents of freedom, followed by a heartbreaking counterpoint, the stark, unforgiving lines of a cage. Then, with a final, hopeful stroke, he rendered the bird liberated once more, its wings spread wide against an endless sky, and pointed first to this emblem of freedom, and then, with solemn purpose, to his own chest. The soul yearns to be unshackled, Alexis murmured, her voice hushed with understanding. The message is as clear as the morning star. Her eyes, now shadowed with the cold truth, met Marcus's. Herein lies our mountain. In the unblinking eyes of the law, Hugh is a phantom, not a person, nor a creature granted sanctuary. He is, in the simplest, cruelest terms, chattel. Whomever can lay claim to his capture, can lay claim to his very being. That is a madness beyond all reason, Marcus breathed, the words catching in his throat. It is the letter of the law, she countered softly. The creatures of this earth are possessions. Even those who mirror our own intelligence, the dolphins that dance in the sea, the great apes who ponder in the forest, they are all, by legal decree, property. In their world, Hugh would be cast in the very same mold. Then what path is left for us to walk? A profound silence settled before Alexis spoke, her voice laced with a quiet fire. We wage a battle against the tide. We will argue for his personhood. This is a path walked before, for the chimpanzee, for the thinking machine, even, heaven help us, for the soulless corporation. Victory has always been elusive, but every dawn holds the promise of a new day. We must illuminate the truth of Hugh's existence, that he is a being of awareness, a captain of his own will, a vessel of language, culture, and a unique spirit. Her gaze then fell upon Hugh, a question that transcended law and entered the realm of spirit. Can you show them the universe that resides within you? Can you prove the substance of your soul? Hugh paused, a universe of contemplation in his stillness, before rising and retreating to his private space. He returned with the fruits of his heart's labor, carvings born from 2 months of patient devotion, a silent testament of forest creatures, of birds caught in mid-flight, and among them a breathtakingly perfect sculpture of Marcus himself, all of which he laid upon the table like a sacred offering. These are his creation? Alexis asked, her voice a whisper of astonishment. Every single one, Marcus affirmed, his heart swelling with a quiet pride. She lifted the small wooden effigy of Marcus, her fingers tracing the loving detail. This is a work of the soul. True art. It is not the hollow echo of mimicry, nor the product of rote training. This is a voice-given form. A soft, resonant sound escaped Hugh's lips as he extended his hand, indicating first the wooden Marcus, then the living, breathing man, and then, in a gesture that spoke more eloquently than any word, he placed his great hand over his own heart. And in that simple, sacred motion, a trinity of truths was revealed: love, family, a place to belong. Alexis gently placed the carving back upon the table, a new light in her eyes. Very well, yes. With this, we have a foundation. There are no certainties, for the halls of justice are often swayed by unpredictable winds. But we have a cause to champion, a stronger cause than I ever dared to hope for. Where does our journey begin? Marcus asked, his voice filled with a fragile hope. Our first step is to raise a shield. We will file for an injunction, a legal sanctuary to forbid anyone from tearing Hugh from this home until his voice can be heard. My argument will be that to remove him would inflict a wound that could never be mended, that his sentience is a visible flame, and his removal a violation of his very will to be. She turned to Hugh. You will need to bear witness, in your own way, to show the arbiter of your fate that you comprehend this storm, and that you are choosing to stand within it. Hugh inclined his head, a silent, solemn vow. Excellent. Our second front will be to gather a council of wise minds, anthropologists, linguists, philosophers of the soul, voices that can speak to the profound truths of awareness, of personhood, of inalienable rights. This council, I must warn you, will come at a great cost. I have a small treasure set aside, Marcus said, his voice quiet, a final gift from Sarah's time on this earth. I was keeping it for. His words drifted into the silence. For what, truly? A future he was already living? He found his answer. I was saving it for a reason that mattered. This is that reason. Prepare yourself, for the path ahead will be a crucible, Alexis cautioned, her tone grave. Those who oppose us will paint Hugh as a monster, a creature of chaos. They will weave tales of danger, branding his presence a menace. Their desire will be to see him in chains while his fate is debated. Never, Marcus declared, his voice an iron resolve. That will not happen. My heart is with yours on this. It is why the injunction is our first and most vital prayer, to keep Hugh here, a gentle prisoner in his own sanctuary, until this judgment has passed. Can the two of you bear such a gilded cage? Marcus turned his gaze to Hugh, and in that shared look, a universe of understanding passed between them, a silent pact forged in the heart of the storm. A mere 2 months have passed in this vigil, Marcus whispered, his voice a quiet current of resolve. We can endure for as long as the seasons turn. With the click of a latch, Alexis secured her briefcase, a vessel of their burgeoning hope. I will set the wheels of justice in motion this very day. By tomorrow's light, the injunction should be a shield around you. Until then, a vow of silence is your only armor. No soul from the press, no inquisitive mind from the world of science. No one. Every word you utter could become a stone they cast against us. She rose, a silhouette of purpose against the doorway, but paused on the threshold to turn back. I must be a harbinger of truth. A battle of this nature has never been won in my time. I have never even heard the whisper of such a victory. The stars are not aligned in our favor, but they have not fallen from the sky entirely? Marcus's voice was a fragile question in the heavy air. Not entirely. Merely a dream whispered against a hurricane. After her departure, a profound silence descended upon the cabin where Marcus and Hugh sat, the gravity of the coming storm settling upon their shoulders like the first silent fall of winter snow. You heard the truth in her words, Marcus murmured into the stillness. A path fraught with peril, a war of words in a cold courtroom that could steal months from our lives. And even should we taste victory, they will seek to snatch it back. This could be a shadow that follows us for years. From Hugh, a sound arose not of fear, but of a quiet, deep-rooted acceptance. Like an ancient tree weathering a storm it has always known was coming. Can your heart find peace in that? Bound to this small world, with no scent of the deep woods, no taste of true freedom, only the four walls of this cabin, and me. Then, Hugh's hand, a map of a life unknown, reached across the worn wood of the table. It found Marcus's, enveloping it in a silent, profound grasp. The unspoken truth flowed between them. This place was sanctuary. Marcus was sanctuary. So be it, Marcus breathed, his voice raw with an emotion too deep for tears. Then we shall wage our war. The decree arrived, a fragile parchment of protection. Hugh was to remain within the sanctuary of Marcus's land, pending a hearing. No hand could be laid upon him without the law's consent. It was not a fortress, but it was a wall, however thin. A date was etched into the calendar, 6 weeks into the future, the 15th of May, and so began the long, quiet season of waiting. The outside world, with its insatiable hunger, found them. Caravans of news vans lined the edge of Marcus's road, a mechanical siege held at bay by a newly erected gate. Reporters, armed with cameras that stole moments, hurled questions into the wind whenever Marcus ventured out. Is it truly the creature of legend? May we be granted an audience? How long have you harbored this secret? Is it a peril to us all? Marcus offered only silence, a shield against their clamor. He drove through their gauntlet of questions, gathered his provisions, and returned to the quiet solitude of his home. In the boundless, faceless realm of the internet, the storm raged with even greater fury. The story had become a digital wildfire. Images of Hugh, ghostly blurs, and sharper, stolen moments taken through Marcus's own windows with telescopic eyes circulated endlessly, birthing 1,000 theories about his origins, his nature, and Marcus's own sanity. Yet, amidst the chaos, voices of compassion arose, declaring that a soul's worth is not measured by its form, that intelligence and heart mattered more than species. Petitions were born, funds were gathered, and campaigns for his personhood blossomed. But for every voice of support, another cried for his capture, for his study, for his demise. They painted him as an aberration, a creature that defied the sacred order of things, and for that transgression had no right to exist. And so, Marcus turned away from the world's clamor, closing the book on its endless, warring words. Hugh, in his quiet world, remained a portrait of tranquility. His hands gave life to wood as he began a new journey through the pages of books, first of simple pictures, then gentle words, and soon texts of growing complexity. Within 3 weeks, his understanding blossomed to that of a young scholar. The art of writing came with more difficulty, but even that frontier he was beginning to conquer. In the hushed embrace of the evenings, Marcus would pore over the cold language of legal briefs, while Hugh coaxed stories from Pine. At times, Marcus would lift his eyes to find Hugh's gaze upon him, a look so profoundly human it stirred his soul, and he would wonder what it was like to be so utterly alone, to know the world wanted to either worship you or cage you, but never just let you be. "Do you ever ache for it?" Marcus asked one night, his voice a whisper of smoke. "The deep green heart of the forest, the boundless sky of your freedom." Hugh placed his carving aside. After a long moment, his hands began to speak. He pointed toward the shadowed woods, his fingers dancing in a memory of walking there. Then he gently tapped his own great chest and pointed a steady finger at Marcus. Finally, his hands came together, forming the simple, sheltering shape of a roof. The meaning bloomed in the quiet air. The forest was the world he had walked through, but Marcus was the world where he lived. This cabin was home. "Even if these walls are the edges of your world," Marcus pressed gently, "even if it becomes a cage?" Hugh's head moved in a slow, resolute shake. He gestured to the locked door, then to his heart, then again to Marcus. At last, his hands opened wide, a gesture of release, of freedom. In that instant, Marcus understood. A cage was not made of walls. A cage was being called property, being owned, being denied choice. But here, with him, Hugh had dignity. He had personhood, a truth that burned brightly even if the law had not yet learned to see it. "Yeah," Marcus breathed, a wave of memory washing over him. "I get it. Sarah used to say something similar. When the illness tethered her to the house, she would tell me, 'Marcus, I am precisely where my heart desires to be, with you. The view doesn't matter, you matter.'" His gaze fell upon Hugh, soft with remembrance. "She would have cherished you. She always kept a special place in her heart for the ones the world had counted out." A soft, resonant sound came from Hugh's chest. He returned to his carving, but a subtle shift had occurred. The air of quiet resignation had lifted, replaced by the unyielding posture of a warrior. A silent vow was forged between them. They would stand against this tide, and perhaps in the quietest corner of hope, a victory awaited. The day of reckoning dawned with an almost cruel serenity, as sunlight streamed and birds wove their melodies through the air. Marcus slipped into his only suit, a relic from 2 decades past that now clung tightly to his middle, while Hugh was a world unto himself, a being for whom no earthly garment was ever made. Alexis awaited them at the threshold of the Denver Federal Courthouse, a colossus of justice with floors of polished marble that mirrored the hurried steps of powerful figures. In this temple of law, Marcus felt like a stranger in a foreign land, and Hugh, a creature from another epoch, was utterly and profoundly adrift. Though a discreet side entrance had been arranged and security forewarned, chaos bloomed in their wake. Hugh stooped to pass through frames not built for his kind, drawing a constellation of stares and a chorus of whispers. A woman succumbed to the spectacle, while a guard's hand instinctively sought his sidearm until Alexis presented the court's decree, a paper shield against a world of fear. Within the courtroom, Every seat was claimed, a gallery brimming with the watchful eyes of the media, while outside, a fractured humanity held its vigil, with signs that cried "Free Hugh" and others that screamed "Cage the monster." Presiding over this crucible was Judge Patricia Wilson, a woman of 67 years, her name a byword for equity, yet tethered to the unyielding letter of the law. Hugh approached the defense table, a silent giant attempting to fold himself into a world too small. The chair was a mockery to his frame, and so he knelt, his head still held higher than any seated soul in the room. When Judge Wilson made her entrance, the room rose as one. Her gaze fell upon Hugh, lingering there for a long, unreadable moment, her face a serene mask that betrayed no hint of the judgment forming within. "We find ourselves in uncharted territory," she began, her voice steady. "I have pored over the submitted briefs. Yet, before we venture further, I wish to address the very heart of this matter." Her eyes found Hugh. "Are my words reaching you? Do you comprehend me?" A slow, deliberate nod was his silent reply. "Do you grasp the gravity of this day, that the very definition of your existence, and perhaps your liberty itself, rests upon the verdict of this court?" Again, his head dipped in solemn acknowledgement. "And is it your own true will to remain with Mr. Thompson? Is this a choice born of your own heart, free from any form of duress?" In response, Hugh rose to his full, breathtaking height, crossed the space to Marcus, and placed a hand upon his friend's shoulder, a gesture of profound connection. Then, turning back to the judge, he gave one final, unequivocal nod. "I understand," Judge Wilson murmured, a pen scratching across her notepad. "Very well. Let the proceedings commence." The subsequent 3 hours were an ordeal of the spirit as the government's counsel, Harrison Tyler, wove a narrative of fear, painting Hugh as an unclassified, perilous entity whose confinement was demanded by public safety and scientific inquiry. Tyler paraded his witnesses: a biologist who spoke of instinct, a psychologist who dismissed artistry as an echo of true sapience, and a law professor who recited a litany of precedents, each one declaring even the most brilliant of creatures as mere chattel. Yet for every blow, Alexis offered a shield, summoning an anthropologist who illuminated Hugh's capacity for symbolic thought, a linguist who marveled at his learning to read in mere weeks, and an ethicist who pleaded that the spark of consciousness, not species, should be the true measure of rights. Then, in a quiet shift of the tide, she called Marcus to the stand. He made the lonely walk to the witness box, his hand resting on the book as he swore an oath to truth, and then he took his seat. "Mr. Thompson," Alexis began, her voice gentle, "would you please tell the court the story of your life with Hugh?" And so Marcus unspooled their history, every sacred thread, the discovery in the deep lake, the seasons shared under one roof, and the quiet miracles, the grace in his carvings, the hunger in his learning, and the profound, unspoken depth of his love. "He chose to remain," Marcus proclaimed, his voice thick with emotion. "When danger knocked at our door, he chose me, and I, him. For is that not the very essence of family? A choice made with the heart." Tyler's cross-examination was a scalpel, probing at Marcus's solitude, suggesting this connection was a fiction born of desperation, insisting that the true landscape of Hugh's mind must forever remain a mystery. "I know precisely what he is thinking," Marcus countered, his gaze unwavering. "He is thinking what any soul would think when their right to be is debated by strangers. He's thinking, please see me. Acknowledge my existence. Do not cast me out from the only sanctuary I have ever called home." A profound hush fell over the courtroom, a silence so deep it felt sacred. Judge Wilson declared a recess, retreating for 2 hours to weigh the soul of a being. In a small anteroom, a strange peace settled upon Hugh, while Marcus was a tempest of frayed nerves, his heart a frantic drum against his ribs. Their entire world hinged on the judgment of one woman. Alexis entered, a fragile beacon in the gloom. "I believe there is hope. Judge Wilson's inquiries are sharp. She is digging deeper than the government's simple narrative." "But," Marcus prompted, "for in the architecture of hope, there is always a but." "But the weight of history is a tide against us," she conceded. "The courts are loath to chart new legal territory, and what we ask of them today is to discover a new world." And so they waited. Hugh took out a small piece of wood, his hands moving in the steady, soothing rhythm of creation. As Marcus watched, his mind drifted back to the morning of Sarah's passing, to her tranquility and her final, loving words. "It's all right, Marcus. You did everything right. Now, you can let me go." His heart was not prepared for the void of Hugh's absence. Not in this moment. Not in any moment yet to come. A bailiff's voice summoned them back to their places, and the chamber once more swelled with anxious souls as Judge Wilson ascended to her seat. "I have weighed the arguments presented," she began, her voice resonating with history. "This is a matter of singular nature, perhaps the most profound I have presided over in my 3 decades upon this bench." And in that suspended moment, Marcus felt the very air in his lungs turn to stone. The letter of the law, as it stands, is unambiguous. Animals, irrespective of their intellect, are deemed chattel. A long shadow of precedent affirms this. Chimpanzees, dolphins, elephants, all have been cast outside the circle of personhood, their glimmers of self-awareness and intricate thought dismissed. A silent scream echoed in his soul. This could not be the path they were meant to walk. And yet, Judge Wilson's voice cut through the despair. Those verdicts were rendered upon species we had catalogued, beings we believed we understood. The soul before this court today is an uncharted territory. Unique. The testimony paints a portrait not merely of intellect, but of a spirit capable of abstract reason, of creating beauty, of forging profound bonds, and of a will to choose its own destiny that rivals, and perhaps even surpasses, our own. And there it was. A fragile, incandescent thing called hope, taking root in the barren soil of his fear. The question, therefore, is not one of intellect. Hugh's brilliance is self-evident. The true question is whether our tapestry of laws can stretch to embrace a being who exists between our classifications. Not human, not animal. Something more. A universe of silence hung in the air before she spoke again. I find that it can, or more precisely, that it must. For to withhold the mantle of personhood from a being who so clearly possesses a conscious self and the freedom of will is to declare that our own humanity is a birthright of biology, not a measure of the soul. And that is a foundation upon which I cannot and will not stand. The room shattered into 1,000 pieces of sound, a symphony of shouts and sobs, as Tyler, a tempest of indignation, rose in protest, his voice lost in the storm until the judge's gavel fell like thunder. "Order! I have not concluded. As a fragile, quiet descended," she continued, "I am bestowing upon Hugh a status of limited personhood. He is no longer property. He cannot be held captive without just cause. He possesses the right to choose where he lays his head. However, as we step into this uncharted territory, I must impose certain safeguards. Hugh shall reside upon the property of Mr. Thompson. He may not venture beyond its borders without the court's leave. And he will be subject to periodic visits to ensure both his own welfare and the peace of the community." Her gaze then settled upon Hugh, a look of profound inquiry in her eyes. "Do you comprehend the shape of this new freedom?" Hugh inclined his great head, a silent, solemn affirmation. "And do you embrace these conditions, knowing they create a sanctuary that is also a gilded cage upon Mr. Thompson's land?" Hugh rose to his full, magnificent height, crossed the space to Marcus, and placed a hand upon his friend's shoulder, a silent anchor in a swirling sea. Then, turning his gaze back to the judge, he gave a slow, deliberate nod. "Yes, so be it. This decree takes effect this very moment. Mr. Tyler, I anticipate your appeal. It is your right to pursue it. But until that day, Hugh's new standing is the law." Her gavel fell, a final, resonant note. This court is adjourned. Marcus remained rooted to the spot, his mind a vessel struggling to contain the impossible tide that had just swept through. They had won. Against all reason, they had truly won. He felt Alexis's arms around him, a grounding embrace, as he heard from Hugh a cascade of sounds, a language of pure joy and profound relief, interwoven. Beyond the walls, the world was a chorus of competing voices, some raised in fury, others in celebration. The single, shining truth remained. They had won. A sacred silence filled the journey home as Hugh rode in the open bed of the truck, a space still too small for his full being, and Marcus navigated the deepening twilight, his thoughts turning over the day's miracle. The appeal would come, a storm on the horizon, but for now, in the quiet grace of this one evening, Hugh was a person. In the eyes of the law, in the heart of the world, the familiar shape of the cabin emerged from the gloom. Hugh descended from the truck and stood, his gaze fixed upon the forest. It was his forest, yet a veil of law still separated him from its depths. He was still a prisoner of this small world, but he was free in the only way that had ever truly mattered. Marcus came to stand beside him on the porch, two silent figures watching the sun bleed its final colors across the mountain peaks. "We did it," Marcus whispered into the stillness. "You are free, in a way." A low, gentle sound rumbled from Hugh's chest, and then, in a gesture that transcended all language, he opened his arms wide, a silent invitation. Without hesitation, Marcus stepped into the embrace, allowing himself to be enfolded by this impossible friend, this soul who defied the definition of human, but embodied the very essence of family. "Thank you," Hugh breathed. Or at least, he sculpted the air into a shape that yearned to be those words. They were fractured sounds, barely clinging to form, but Marcus heard them perfectly, deciphering the profound meaning beneath the shattered syllables. "No," Marcus managed, his own voice thick with unshed tears. "Thank you for choosing this life, for placing your trust in my hands, for reminding a man who had forgotten what it feels like to be a harbor for another soul." And so they stood on the porch as the night draped its velvet cloak around them, two solitary spirits who had discovered a universe in one another against all probability, two warriors who had battled for the simple right to share a world, two victors who had earned, however fragile the prize, the chance to continue choosing each other day after day. And within, the cabin waited a sanctuary of warmth, a bastion of safety, a place they could finally, truly, call home. And for the first time in the vast expanse of 3 years, a chasm of time carved out by Sarah's passing, where loneliness was a palpable ache in his very bones, a profound sense of completeness settled over Marcus's soul. This newfound peace was not born from the illusion of a finished fight, for it was far from over. The echoes of appeals were already on the horizon, promising more hearings, more relentless battles. A life intertwined with Hugh's would never tread the path of simplicity. Yet, the pursuit of a simple life was a pale ambition next to the truth he now held. What mattered was the unbreakable bond they had forged, the defiant act of choosing one another. Love in its most unconventional and breathtaking guises, that was the only currency of any real worth. Marcus had reached into the heart of a frozen lake and drawn forth a life gasping for air. He had carried him across the threshold into warmth, had become his champion in a world that sought to deny him, and had secured for him the most fundamental right of all, the right to exist. And in a profound and silent reciprocity, Hugh had done no less for Marcus. He had chosen this man, had remained when all reason might have suggested flight, had waged his own quiet war, and had rescued Marcus from the suffocating ice of his own solitary sorrow. The scales of salvation were perfectly balanced. They were, in the truest sense of the word, family. And that, in its profound simplicity, was everything. The first stars began to pierce the velvet dusk, and the ancient forest seemed to breathe a long, slow sigh around them. And there, Marcus Thompson, at 63 years of age, his joints aching with arthritis, his spirit as stubborn as the mountain stone, a man guided more by his heart than by his head, stood on his porch with his friend, Hugh, and knew, with a certainty that settled deep in his soul, that he had finally created something that would endure beyond his own time, a thing of true and lasting consequence, something that had been worth every single moment of the arduous struggle.